Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 67 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dane. The other voice you will hear, as always, is Matt Feuerstein. Matt, I finally got one of my vaccination shots. This podcast is officially somewhat safe to listen to.
Yeah, we won't be spitting that COVID into your ears anymore. No, I am vaccinated. Trevor is half vaccinated. So I think that will make the rest of you jealous. No, I don't know. Yeah, if there's anyone here listening that's actually able to get vaccinated and choosing not to, don't do that. You should do it. Go get that shot. Then you'll be like us, and that's the real reason to get it.
I mean, I know, our friend Alan Cunahan, depending on what country you live in, it looks like he got a cool sticker. I did not get a sticker. I understand, Matt, that you live in a country where you can get free donuts for getting a shot. Here, I got nothing but, I guess, the simple satisfaction of knowing I've may have reduced my chances of dying. But depending where you live, you might get extra bonus treats in addition to getting vaccinated.
Yeah, I still have not taken anyone up on their free vaccine offers. But yeah, I can get a free mini cheesecake from Junior's. I tried to do that on Mother's Day, and the line was out the door. I think not for the free cheesecakes, but like for regular Mother's Day cheesecakes. And I decided to leave. It was pouring rain, and it was a very long line that wasn't moving. So no cheesecake for me yet. But I still got another week. I think it's still Memorial Day. Speaking of this time of month, it is very early in the year for a heat wave, but we have one this weekend with a couple of 90-degree days. So I am suffering. I know, feel terrible for me. I'm definitely the one with the problem that you should feel bad for this month. That's a joke. You shouldn't feel bad for me about anything. I deserve everything that happens to me. I promise you. But I was going to say this, unrelated. One way I know that your Twitter is really popular is whenever you tweet that you're going to record an episode of this tonight, it gets way more likes than any time that we actually share the episode that we have finished. Do you ever notice that? like we're going to record tonight. Everyone's like, yeah, way to go. And then we're like, hey, new episode. And they're like, I don't want anything to do with this. Why are you showing me this? Leave me alone. Stop bothering me. That's what they say.
Well, if anyone's actually listening to this, we know people are listening to this. We do well enough. We're top 2 Ring of Honor podcasts in terms of listenership. I mean, I think there's only 2, but we do well enough.
Retro Ring of Honor podcast, yeah.
Yes, retro. Let's define that even more. Let's not make it too broad a net. But in terms of the ways you can listen, I just want to remind everyone, as I always do, if you're listening on the Pro Wrestling Only feed and you just want a feed that is just us, in recent months we've added a feed that is just us. So just search Through the Years on your favorite podcast provider. If you found us just on our solo feed and you go, hey, you know what, this feed's a little too sparse. You only give us an episode every 2 to 4 weeks. I'd like a feed of podcasts where I get you guys, but a bunch of other shows too. Well, then search for the Pro Wrestling Only podcast feed because we're still on there, plus a bunch of other great podcasts. And if you're locked in some kind of room where all you have is a laptop that is like kind of parental control locked, where the only site you can visit is YouTube, you could still listen to us because our episodes are now being uploaded to YouTube. So,
man, what a bad parent if that's the only site they're letting their kid visit, because that is not the place you want them to visit.
Oh, come on, man. YouTube, got very strict policies about what can and can't go up there. Lots of only good stuff is on YouTube, including Through the Years. But
sure.
So we got a bunch of news between the last show and this one that happened. We always cover the news that happened between the shows we cover, but it's almost all related to one story, of course, and that's the continued romancing by WWE of CM Punk. And we obviously, everyone knows what happens with this story. That's one of the things doing a retro podcast. But I think there are some interesting notes here, including some things I did not remember or did not know. And it's just interesting to me to follow it as it goes along. So we'll go to first the Wrestling Observer. Dave Meltzer writes, An update on WWE looking to sign CM Punk, Samoa Joe, and Bryan Danielson before TNA. Punk was offered
This
a
could be written.
developmental
This could be written right now.
except for the TNA part. Punk
Yes,
was
he'd say Impact. Sorry to keep interrupting you, but I got to get these jokes in.
No problem.
He'd say Impact now. That's the only difference.
I mean, Impact is like trying to make you think that Bryan Danielson and Samoa Joe are coming to their next pay-per-view. If you look at their promo videos, I believe like their recent promo video had just like the word yes with like an exclamation mark on it. So I mean, they certainly want you to take that impression. But so anyway, Dave continued to write. Punk was offered a developmental deal and would start in OVW. To the best of my knowledge, Joe was called by WWE, but they haven't discussed the situation with him yet. Not sure if they found Danielson yet, although John Laurinaitis was given the hurry up on him. That's not the last time we'll hear, have we found Bryan Danielson yet, which is really funny because at this point, he was off to Europe for a few months to kind of reassess his life and wrestle there for a few months. And I like the idea that like, Bryan Danielson was just uncontactable while in Europe. I like the idea he's like Ozzie Smith in the baseball episode of The Simpsons where, I could just imagine like Vince McMahon's version of Smithers to his Mr. Burns. I imagine like John Laurinaitis being like, Sir, Bryan Danielson appears to have fallen off the face of the earth. And Danielson's just like swirling in a vortex somewhere with some British wrestlers.
He was hanging out with Jesse Ventura off the grid.
Getting the frog flippers, doing those wet works. So next we go to the Pro Wrestling Torch. They wrote, CM Punk acknowledged to Slam Sports in Canada that he has a WWE offer and he's been sitting on it for about a week. He said he thinks the state of TNA has an influence over the type of contract offered by WWE. Quote, I think if TNA was a healthier company, I think I'd probably be somewhere already, he said. But I think the WWE knows that TNA doesn't have TV and they're not going to be signing anybody so they can bide their time with talent. Whereas if there were two companies, like when it was WCW and WWE, you either go to one or the other. And if someone really wanted you, they would have a bidding war and they would snatch you up. I like to think that the wrestling business in the next few years is going to be on the upswing, and I'm going to be on top of it. It'll come around. It just takes time. Punk says WWE isn't rushing his decision of whether to sign with WWE or stick with Ring of Honor. Quote, I've been sitting on an offer for a week, and I've been thinking about it, and I think it means the world that I've been given the time to think. They didn't try to rush me into anything. They gave me time to think. So, Matt, you talk about, like, things that seem just as true now as they did 16 years ago. The whole thing about, like, Punk saying I'd be signed right now if there was like two strong wrestling companies because there'd be a bidding war. Like, boy, has AEW and WWE in the recent years proved like exactly that. Like, is there any doubt that if TNA was as big as AEW and they were around a few years before 2005 at that level, like that Punk and Danielson and Joe would all never have even gotten to this point. They'd all be in WWE or AEW right now, probably WWE. Like, they'd all be in NXT right now, probably.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, at this point, yes, definitely. At that time, like if WCW was still around, I'm not as certain about that because they were still the types of guys that wouldn't have really been looked at by WWE. They might have been in WCW, honestly, but yeah, certainly now they definitely would have never made it to this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, back then, it would have been a completely different situation because there were still size biases, and maybe Bryan Danielson would be like, I think Bryan Danielson always wanted to be like Dean Malenko in the WCW Cruiser division, so maybe he'd be there and be living out his dream role when he was younger because I think that's one of his inspirations to get into wrestling was those kinds of wrestlers in that division. I mean,
really, they probably would have done well in like ECW.
Yeah, definitely. Paul Heyman would have. I mean, we know Paul Heyman loves some CM Punk, so yeah. I think he would have loved him even back then. But continuing on, the Pro Wrestling Torch, still them, Wade notes, during his recent tryouts at WWE Raw /Heat events, Punk also cut practice promos backstage. He impressed John Laurinaitis, who is said by multiple sources to be high on Punk. So I thought that's a little surprising because John Laurinaitis was always, known to be a guy kind of enforcing the WWE edict of no one under 6'2" or 6'4", something like that for a time, and more of a body guy. And the idea that John Laurinaitis was apparently a big fan of CM Punk or at least saw potential in him, you wouldn't necessarily think that'd be the guy that saw something in him, but according to the Torch, he did. And then we go back to the Observer. So
I have a quick question
Dave,
for that. I have a quick question for that. Like, I hate saying this because, like, who knows who listens, but do you consider the Torch as reliable of a source of, like, news like that as you do the Observer? Like when the Torch reports something quite like that, are you like, do you take it at its word? Because, like, if Dave reported that, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably true. The Torch, I always found, like, some of the sources I didn't totally trust. And, like, sometimes in some different eras that's changed, like, in reverse, switched roles. But, like, at that time, like, I don't know if I totally buy that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything, but, like...
No, I get it. I think, first off, like you were saying, I think it was fluid because, you know, there's been definitely with the Torch, there have been different eras where you could tell they had more sources than other times. The thing I would say with the Torch compared to the Observer is, on the plus side of the Torch, you would get way more frequently, like, Observer hardly ever gives a direct quote, which makes it another layer of interpretation where you always have to go, like, whatever Dave is being told in the Observer, you kind of have to filter through him because he's rarely doing direct quotes, where the Torch, as we can see with, like, some of the statements I've already read, Wade would frequently use, like, direct quotes from his sources, you know, word for word quotes.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. But about going to your point, I think on the downside, a lot of times I got the feeling with Wade that, like, if one person told him something that was maybe just kind of their opinion, like, Wade would just throw it up and wouldn't give a lot of context. Like, I felt more, and I'm sure, you know, Dave in the Observer has been swayed by an individual source, but I felt like sometimes with the Torch, like, if one person said something, Wade would just throw it up and kind of give more weight to it without really putting it in context. Like, there was that episode recently we talked about where we had the quote from the unnamed source in the Torch who said something like, you know, oh, I think Punk's going to get along great with Triple H, you know, and he's not a threat to Triple H at all, and they're really alike. And, like, clearly, you know, not that was, like, you know, that was just someone's opinion, but that's the kind of quote I don't think you would get in the Observer. And yeah, I think with the Torch, I think the tone of the reporting was always a little bit more gossipy. You know, it was a little more direct with the quotes, but also a little more, this person told me this and I'm just throwing it up there, where the Observer, it was more kind of all unified behind Dave's voice in a weird way.
Yeah, it makes sense. I remember, like, one thing in the 2000s that, like, just as far as, like, Wade being swayed, I think, was he would always argue that the invasion, like, couldn't have been better than it was because, you know, WCW guys wouldn't have been able to do this, that. I don't remember the exact argument. And, like, and people didn't really want that at that time, and that's why it was not worth bringing in all these other, you know, better, you know, bigger names from WCW that WWF didn't bring in. And the one thing that I always remember is, like, well, that he always just didn't bring up the fact that the Invasion pay-per-view, like, did really, really amazing business. He was clearly just parroting something that, you know, people in WWE would say, as opposed to doing, you know, that sort of critical analysis. Like, and again, Wade has done good reporting in other times, so I don't want to seem like I'm knocking him. I was a Torch subscriber for a long time. Right now, I don't subscribe to either, but I don't know. Yeah, what you said, I think that it's a little bit more. He's a little bit more credulous of sources, at least during this era, because I do think that there's a little bit of that with Dave now with other promotions, but yeah. Anyway, sorry for the aside.
No, that's a really interesting aside. I'm glad we got to talk about it. Anytime you want an aside, I'm always ready to step aside for an aside. But going to the Observer
I'll pull you
again,
aside first.
I'm beside myself. Anyway, going to the Observer. Dave writes, Gabe Sapolsky believes there is a strong possibility they will lose Punk now, but is expecting at this point that Samoa Joe would be staying. The other key guy right now in question would be James Gibson. Gibson has made no attempt to go to TNA because he was doing well enough with New Japan and Indies, plus WWE, when letting him go, told him to avoid working TNA and they'd bring him back. It's been long enough to bring him back, particularly when the WWE is in the acquisition mode, so he may be more open to TNA in a month. So that's kind of interesting because one thing I guess we'll talk about later in the year, but one thing that's interesting is, I guess, you know, the thought was always that Gabe had always planned for James Gibson to win the title this year, or at least for quite a while, and maybe the reign wasn't quite as long because, you know, Gibson ended up going back to signing with WWE very quickly, you know, right around the time he got the title. But it's interesting because you read stuff like this, and it sounds like Gibson kind of always knew that WWE was kind of in his back pocket, like that he was probably going to be able to return relatively quickly if he just stayed away from TNA, apparently. So I wonder if they just kind of assumed that it would be like more of a year away, like, because, Gibson's gone for less than a year from WWE before he's back. But it is interesting that, it sounds like here this is months before he gets the title, but already you got people reporting that, like, oh, WWE told him, like, just stay calm and we'll bring you back eventually.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm trying to remember, what was it that he was let go for? Was it because they didn't have the wellness policy yet.
What was it? Something like that? Let me look that up. I think it might have been some kind of maybe steroids or something. You never know.
Because I don't think they were really doing that until after Eddie Guerrero died, if I'm remembering correctly. But I know that in the mid '90s they put in that steroid policy, and then like around the Attitude Era they were like, wait, what? What about that? I don't remember that. And then Eddie Guerrero died, and they were like, wellness. It's all about wellness.
So according to Wikipedia, Matt, which is never wrong, they write, James Gibson left WWE on September 15th, 2004, when his steroid usage came to light following a staph infection. Gibson was then released from his contract at his request to take some time off. So
none of that makes any sense.
This is something, obviously, if I knew this was going to come up, I would have probably read some more newsletters to refresh my memory. I'm sure this is one of those moments in podcasts where the listeners who know this are going, this is exactly what happened. I can't believe you guys don't remember that. But I did vaguely remember it was something to do with steroids. But yeah, the way that is written is definitely a little one-sentence ride there, where discovered due to a staph infection, and then he asked for a release so he could take some time off. Like, okay,
why would one lead? I guess don't understand like how the two things would be connected. But anyway, okay, so I guess that's what happened. Thanks, Wikipedia.
As always, trustworthy Wikipedia. So next we go to another Observer quote. This because the story was really developing over the weeks between the last show and the show we're covering today. Dave wrote, an update on CM Punk, Samoa Joe, and Bryan Danielson. Punk is said to be 50-50 on going to WWE. The deal with Punk is between all his indie bookings, his announcing work with Ring of Honor, and running the Ring of Honor Wrestling School. He's not getting rich, but he's not struggling either. He doesn't need to be an OVW guy. One person close to him figured, quote, and I'll get to this later, I don't know exactly the downside, but I have a good guess. So one person close to him figured a, quote, blank downside would be the magic number. As any less, he'd probably turn it down, but more, he'd probably go. Punk did an interview over the weekend and gave the impression that he doesn't consider TNA a viable offer. Punk said he's been sitting on offer and for a week from WWE, and they've given him time to consider all options. He gave the impression if it was a big money offer, he'd have already signed. He said he only considers that he's gotten one offer, saying, quote, obviously there's TNA, but how much of an offer can they make if they don't have TV? Joe has told friends he doesn't believe WWE seriously wants him, just that they don't want TNA to have him. But right now he's got 3 offers to choose from, as he's always wanted to work New Japan, but now with Simon Inoki as president, he has a legit offer there as well, since Simon is tight with him. What may help TNA is if the company gets TV, because without it nobody is going there, Joe could work TNA and get TV and pay-per-view exposure, New Japan and get Major League experience on tours, and Ring of Honor, where he's still largely considered the top guy. If he works WWE, that's all he can work. Danielson is now in England, so who knows if anyone has even found him yet, although he is tight with Regal. Again, Matt, the mystery of where Bryan Danielson is continues. So one thing I want to say, so about that number.
My guess with Danielson, by the way, before you do that, is he must just not have had a cell phone, which I could definitely see. Like the Danielson in 2005 was still a holdout on getting a cell phone. And
yeah,
was like, I'm going to go to England and ditch my cell phone, one or the other.
You could definitely see Danielson, especially 2005 Bryan Danielson, going off the grid, being a young Tim Thatcher type. Just I don't need this technology. But it is kind of hilarious that, like, reading these Torches and Observers and PW Insider week to week to kind of, as I do the research for these shows, it's kind of funny that this was a period of time where, like, every week it seems like the newsletters were talking about where's Joe going, where's Punk going, where's Danielson going, and every time it's like, well, can anyone even get in contact with Bryan Danielson? Like, he's at the middle of all these rumors, and people just act like he is just, undiscoverable, which he going to what you said, may well have been, but it's just kind of funny. It's such a weird Danielson thing. But so that number, why I don't have the downside number, and I'll just give you guys a little behind the scenes thing about how we make the podcast. This is the work I do for you people. Matt is frying right now in 90 plus degree weather for you. This is the work I do for you. We're gonna guilt you, Matt. You said no guilt. I'm guilting them. So I read through all the Observers to get news, and along with Torches, PW Insider, other different websites to get the news for these shows and just tidbits and stuff. But I had a long-term subscription to the Observer during this time, but I can't find the paper copy issues. So luckily we have an online source of scans. So looking through the scans, this scan of this particular issue has, as sometimes Observers, anyone that got the print subscription knows, sometimes you would get unfortunate pink ink smudges in the printing. This one has the world's most unfortunate smudge right over the number of what Downside Punk was looking for. So at that point, I looked all over the internet. I downloaded like 3 or 4 different sources from the dark web of the same issue of the Observer. And what I discovered is basically everyone on the internet that has scans of the Observer must have scanned from use the same one scan that someone uploaded. Someone then contacted me because I put out a call on Twitter, and they said, "Oh, I've got the issue." They sent it to me. They did not check it first. It was the same scan again. The Observer website, which I'm subscribed to, does not have this issue uploaded yet. So all I could work out from the size was it was a 5-digit number, and I was guessing it was 40,000 because I think I could see a little straight line coming from the first digit at the bottom under the smudge. So I thought 40,000 makes sense. But then, Matt, I got a DM from someone that knew CM Punk at the time, and they told me, if I remember right, Punk told me he signed for $750 a week with OVW, more than the usual $500 a week they offered at the time. So I think this kind of jives with my theory that it was $40,000 a year he was looking for, because 750 times 52 is $39,000 a year. So if he got that, that's basically around if he was looking for 40,000, that's right around what he was looking for. So first off, all
that work, and I already told you that 3 is a magic number, and it was 00003 is what that 5-digit number said. I'm thinking less of the Schoolhouse Rock version of the song and more of the De La Soul version of the song. But so if you want to pop that song in your head, that's the version that I'm thinking of.
Always pop De La Soul in your head. So I'll go to I kind of want to talk about the Punk money thing, but first there's another quote from the Torch which helps kind of steer the conversation there. Back to Wade. CM Punk continues to consider a WWE contract offer, but hasn't made a decision yet as he awaits word on TNA's TV future and ponders the pros and cons of signing. The downside of signing with WWE is that he'd be working under a starter-level contract, better than a standard developmental deal, but still not lucrative. Then he'd give up his freedom, likely be required to relocate to Ohio Valley, at least at first, pay road expenses, and have no guarantee of a push and higher pay down the line. He also has a good gig as a Ring of Honor main eventer and trainer, and with TNA offering an estimated $750 to $1,000 per date for about 40 dates a year, he could easily make as much money with a Ring of Honor TNA indie combo schedule, work fewer dates, and have more creative control than a WWE deal. But by not signing with WWE, he'd be giving up a chance to pay some WWE dues, earn tenure, and have a chance at the $300,000 plus salary level that isn't attainable on the U.S. indie scene at this time in any form for even the top workers. So, I mean, Matt, clearly Punk made the right decision, signing with WWE. We all know that now. He probably made, in his best years, well over the $300,000. Wade is even suggesting it's like the payoff at the end of the rainbow. But it is kind of funny sometimes where I remember during this era, people always assumed that even if you just signed a developmental deal, you'd be making way more money than you would make on the indies. And I think even at this time when maybe the indies were still not quite as hot as they could be and the merchandising aspects weren't quite as hot as they would be, like, I think the economics that Wade is laying out here and knowing what we think about the numbers, going to OVW for Punk in 2005 was probably a pay cut. Initially until he broke through into the main roster. And that, I don't think that was rare for indie guys over the last, during this period of time over the next decade from 2005, that if you were a top indie guy, you could probably make more than they were offering to go to Ohio Valley or the early days of NXT.
Except that you didn't have to travel at all.
And it was more guaranteed where, if you're a guy that's just making money based on indie bookings, hustling those and working the merch tables, if you get hurt, no one's paying you money. Like I left this out of the last episode, but we talked about how Samoa Joe, showed up at the last show, even though he was hurt. He did that little angle with Austin Aries, and I didn't use this on the show, but I think in Samoa Joe's live journal, he kind of glibly says something like, I was showing up because I'm not going to not get paid. Like, there was this pressure where you got to go even if you're hurt, because it's not like a guaranteed major company contract where if you don't show up, you're getting a guaranteed money per week, per month, anything like that. So there was also that kind of financial security, I imagine, that also is a benefit.
Right, and of course, just the dream, You're trying to get into wrestling because you have a dream, and, that was where you chased it. Probably still is for some crazy reason.
I mean, there are people, think of how old we are. We're in our 30s, but think of how old we are, where there are people that are like young adults now, and unless they were big TNA fans or got into tape trading or the indies, in terms of major league on big cable station wrestling, WWE is all they know. And that's why sometimes these guys sign with like NXT now, these young guys, and people go like, why didn't they sign with AEW or New Japan or stuff? And I think with some of these people forget, for some people, it's like WWE was wrestling. Like that was their entire childhood, where you think about people even older than us, how really, depending on where you lived, had lots of territories to choose from. If you lived in a major market, you could probably get multiple ones of them on your television. People like us at least grew up with WWF and WCW and later ECW. There's a generation of people where the nostalgia, there's one nostalgia, but it's just labeled WWE. There's nothing else to them.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm one of those old people now that's like, I just can't imagine how anybody, if they only know about WWE, how can anybody even get into wrestling now? Like, it doesn't even make sense to me. Like, that's how old I am. But I guess every generation probably had that attitude, right?
I mean, I got into wrestling, when I really got into it was probably 94 WWF, which I don't think is considered to be a particularly great, other than maybe Bret Hart and a few other guys. That was kind of
you're right. You're right. It was not the best.
but for me, that's what hooked me. And the first WCW pay-per-view I convinced my mom to buy me was the first WCW Uncensored. Which again, it shows you, I do think sometimes if you just have a proclivity, if you're meant to like wrestling, even bad wrestling will hook you, I guess, for some people.
Yeah, I guess. It just feels like what WWE has been over the past decade has just been something different. I don't know. But again, what it was in 1989 or whatever, when I started watching more, is something different than it was in 1979. So who am I to say, right?
And finally, in the longest news section ever, we just got a couple quick notes. Pro Wrestling Torch again. Samoa Joe's talks with WWE haven't resulted in any formal offer being made, but there is definitely interest and plans for future conversations. Obviously, that doesn't really come to anything. Joe's TNA bound. And then finally from the Torch, and I thought this was interesting, they wrote, Ring of Honor's Colt Cabana was also backstage at a recent WWE taping, but was not used. So, Colt getting a bit of a look, and, right around the same time as Punk, but obviously we know he doesn't go to WWE right now. He does eventually go, and it does not turn out well for him, unfortunately. It pretty much the opposite of CM Punk's run, except that in both cases it ended badly. So that brings us to the show we're covering today. New Frontiers took place June 4th, 2005 at the Amherst Pepsi Center in Buffalo, New York. Although I think it was in someplace, Williams something?
A suburb of Buffalo, yeah.
Williamsville, which I think is like 7 minutes from, or 17 minutes. Anyway, it basically took place in Buffalo in front of a reported crowd of 500 fans. This was a Ring of Honor's first ever show in Buffalo. Dave wrote in The Observer that Buffalo was ECW's best consistent market, and Toronto was the best wrestling city in North America, and this isn't that far away. The company has 2 dates booked there, the first being in June at the Pepsi Center on the University of Buffalo campus this summer. Because Buffalo was one of ECW's best markets, probably partially because of its proximity to Toronto, they were hoping to make it one of the company's key markets. Come the fall, they won't be able to book the Pepsi Center, so they are looking at the Erie County Fairgrounds for October, but there may not be enough height clearance for the lighting rigs. They aren't looking at running the Burt Flickinger Center, where ECW ran right now. I think the place held 4,000, which is out of this group's league, although it was scouted. And the Pro Wrestling Torch adds, the building was basically the building they're running tonight, that is, for this show. The building was basically a hockey version of the Rexplex, and the show was set up inside one of the rinks. This was a bit awkward because all the general admission seats were on one side, and worst of all, were behind the boards with the glass left up.
And we got to see that during one of the matches, too.
Yeah, definitely. That was a highlight for me. It wound up not making much difference because the floor seats didn't sell out, and Ring of Honor owner Kerry Silkett invited the fans in the bleachers to fill in the back rows on the floor. Apparently, Ring of Honor was reasonably happy with the advance sales because they already had their next Williamsville show planned for August 27th. So, Matt, we were talking about this in private a few days ago. I think, basically, Ring of Honor runs 2 more shows in Buffalo, and then they don't run there anymore. So for all this talk about how good a market was for ECW and how close in proximity it is to Toronto and how they're happy with the first the sales for this show, when 500 for this time was not a horrible crowd by any means for Ring of Honor. I don't know if I haven't looked far enough ahead, but I don't know if the ticket sales for the next 2 shows are down, but I believe it's 2 more shows and then they're done already.
They're done during the Gabe Sapolsky era. They do go back after, years later, but a bunch of times. But yes, during this particular era in ROH, it's these 305 shows, and then they're like, all right, never mind.
Yeah. Definitely interesting. The Ring of Honor, this was another one of those years where they're trying to take stabs at finding new major markets they could run regularly, and this was a stab that didn't quite take, apparently. So, finally, we opened the show with James Gibson and Spanky backstage. Gibson says tonight they could be just like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero at the end of WrestleMania 20. Yeah.
Do we need to say anything?
Well, I mean, it's okay to be like Chris Benoit at the end of WrestleMania 20. It's worse if you're like Chris Benoit at later stages of his life.
Just the fact that it was like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, man, just like treating that like it was, this great happy. I mean, we all still felt that way in 2005. Like, man, what a moment for people who like us who love wrestling. That's how we thought about it. That's how we thought about it in June of 2005.
Remember that time where we said, Matt, this is the most heartwarming moment in pro wrestling history, and this quote will definitely never come back to haunt us. And we were like having a party on an ancient Indian burial ground when we said that, and then there was a big lightning strike. And anyway, Gibson says that he was there at WrestleMania 20, and it was awesome. Gibson is super pumped and trying to hype Spanky up, and he mentions how he's going to beat Samoan Joe tonight. Spanky says they've been friends and seen the world together, but this is the first time they've had shots like this, with no limitations. He says if they fall short tonight, they have no one to blame but themselves. They hug and walk away, Spanky's arm around Gibson. Aw, very cute.
The no limitations thing I still find weird in kayfabe terms, Like what is the implication? That like in WWE, they were like, go out there, but try to win, but don't try that hard to win. You know what I mean? It's kind of that weird straddling of reality and fiction. I don't know.
I completely agree. Wasn't there that one Spanky comeback promo where he said something like, no one telling me not to do too many, high flying moves or cool moves. He said something to that effect. And even now it's like, that's on the borderline. Like, why would someone be telling you not to do moves to win a wrestling match? But
yeah, even the whole thing, when during the Aries match later, where they're like, Aries isn't going to try to have a thing where his match isn't as good as the pure title match. And, in kayfabe terms, it's sort of like, well, wouldn't he just want to win fast? But then I do have to say, there is a thing in MMA where guys do try to have the best fight too, right? So maybe it's not that far-fetched. I don't know.
There are guys known for having I'm like the fight of the night. Like actually, that's interesting. I mean, this is a tangenty show already, but I want to ask you, Matt, because I was thinking about this the other day. What do you think about Kenny Omega hyping himself up as the best bout machine? Because that kind of goes with what you're talking about here, which is the idea of like. I kind of agree with you. Like, I always feel a little bit weird, like, when a wrestler's hyping how good their matches are. Like, in a way, like you said, MMA fighters sometimes do it. But it is weird, like, shouldn't your focus being like, I'm the guy that wins the most, not the guy that, when you think about it, if you are having great wrestling matches, that means you're usually going through, like, long, arduous 50-50 matches, which wouldn't you rather, in kayfabe terms, be the guy that's like, my matches aren't that exciting because I win in like 3 minutes, and like I'm Mike Tyson in the early days where I'm knocking a guy out in the second round.
Although his fights were exciting for that very reason, but yeah.
I mean, yes, truly, Mike Tyson, as they often say, the Bill Goldberg of professional boxing.
Yeah.
But but I mean, do you think wrestlers should hype themselves up as like, I'm all about the great matches, like in storyline?
If I was like in charge of all wrestling, I probably wouldn't go that route myself, but it's, at this point, it's such a common thing. I mean, Shawn Michaels, Mr. WrestleMania, right? The Showstopper, right? Rob Van Dam, right? The whole fucking show, right? Like, just like, that's
what it stood for all this time. I never knew that.
The whole farting show.
Man, I never like to assume, so I just kept my mind open.
That's the parody of Rob Van Dam where he hosts like a talk show called The Whole Fartin' Show, and everyone just like has like fart competitions. I don't know. Anyway, but seriously, I it's not my favorite thing, but it's in a long tradition of that sort of gloating, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not something like I'm outraged by, or occasionally it feels a little bit weird. It's not something big, but I just wanted to talk about that because like you talk about that, I was like, you hit on something that I've kind of privately felt for a long time.
My objection to it is, who calls them bouts?
Sometimes when I was writing like recaps for things, like I would eventually like get tired of running matches and I would start writing bout occasionally just to mix it up. And I was going, what am I, from like the 40s? But I would keep doing it like,
what if you are,
this bout was pretty good.
What if you are from the 40s?
Time traveling.
That's right.
We go elsewhere backstage where Lacey, Cloudy, and Cheech are somewhere that sounds like it's near a loud buzzing machine, possibly a soda machine that's just off camera. I don't know how they couldn't have found a better spot to cut this promo. Lacey says she couldn't be in New York for the recent new Manhattan Mayhem show because she was signing sponsorship deals for Lacey's Angels. She calls Cloudy her personal assistant and Cheech her secretary. She orders Cloudy to get her some water. Cheech wants to know where Izzy and Deranged are tonight, and Lacey says she gave them a bonus and some time off because they deserve it. Cheech wants to know when he'll get a chance like that. Lacey says he'll get him a match tonight, but if he fails, it's back to doing the books for him. Well, technically doing the books for her, but it'll be for him. So it's kind of funny for me, some reason for me to think of like Cheech, like doing somebody's taxes for some reason. Like, yeah, this is my accountant, Cheech. But
hey, he can do mine. I don't care. She seemed like she was in a good mood, which is very unlike the Lacey they typically present. Like, she was just like, yeah, things are great. We're getting sponsorships. All right, I'll give you a break, Cheech. Like, she was uncharacteristically positive in this promo. And I kind of liked it. It was like, you know what? Lacey should just be more like happy-go-lucky. She also, you left out that she was getting sponsorships with P. Diddy.
Well, he was at Manhattan Mayhem, Matt. We all know that.
Right.
So we go to our opening match. The Embassy of Fast Eddie and Jimmy Rave with Jade Chung and Prince Nana defeated El Generico and Salvatore Renaro in 11 minutes, 34 seconds when Rave pinned Renaro after hitting the Rave Clash. Matt, this was Sal Renaro's debut in Ring of Honor as Sal Renaro. I think he had made an appearance on at least one Ring of Honor show as Mello, a member of Special K. But this is really, I mean, for all intents and purposes, his real debut in Ring of Honor. What do you think about the match and Sal Renaro? He got quite a bit of time here.
I think Sal actually was pretty good, considering. It was interesting to see Jimmy Rave go from main eventer to opening match guy, but not just opening match, like an opening match against two like real undercarders at the time. These guys had no stature in ROH, Renaro and Generico. And, and Fast Eddie wasn't exactly a top name either. But Prazak was the most disappointing person in this match to me. Gabe and Prazak were on commentary, and the first thing Prazak says is, "I noticed the ring steps are pretty hot. Oh, wait, that's just Jade Chung." I would never have expected that from Dave Prazak, of all people. Right? Like, is it just me?
Yeah, I mean, knowing how big of a champion, I mean, obviously, I always hate when people act like it was a different time when it was only 16 years ago, but the standards in wrestling for how the treatment were way different. And he was playing along with a gimmick that Gabe was putting in place. But yeah, knowing how big a champion of women's wrestling he is and how influential and important he's been, it was a little surprising to hear him just like playing along with it and not doing maybe more of a Mark Nolte kind of like, "Gabe, you misogynist, you shouldn't like this" kind of act, like being more of that kind of guy.
Yeah, I imagine that Prazak probably didn't feel comfortable doing that to Gabe, but just like kind of like, yeah, not going along with it, at least just being outraged by it, if anything, and not because Gabe wasn't really doing that. Gabe was actually more of the this is outrageous how they're treating Jade Chung. But I thought it was like a very opener style opener, if that makes sense, like just a. The faces come in and the embassy are healing it up. The baby faces are hitting leapfrogs and drop kicks and arm drags and all that stuff. And Renaro does a pretty impressive run up moonsault press on Eddie, and the crowd is very excited for him to hot tag Generico. Rave does the distracting the ref thing a couple times, and there's a good spot when the ref is tied up arguing with Generico and Rave pulls Sal into his corner so he and Eddie could work him over some more. And they get the heat on him. And the crowd's pretty hot, I have to say, for the opener. They would not be that way for every match, but they were pretty into the opener. Cheering Sal on, and Rave keeps cutting him off. There was a nice touch where Rave had Sal in a hold, and then he tags in Eddie, and Eddie puts on the same exact hold. You don't see that very often in tag team matches, and it makes sense, right? If you're working a hold, and it's like one guy gets tired, just let the other guy keep working the hold, right? That's actually makes a lot of sense. There wasn't a ton of tag team matches with Rave and Eddie, but I thought they were pretty all right. Eventually, at one point Sal goes for a crossbody, but Eddie catches him, gets him up on his shoulders, and drops him down across his knee. Rave keeps getting his licks in whenever the referee is distracted. They're really healing it up. At a certain point, Renaro reverses a hip toss into a shin breaker on Rave, and he quickly tags in Generico. Generico is a house of fire, but Rave cuts him off with a gonorrhea. And Renaro hits what Prazak calls the Phoenix Fury leg drop, which I can't really describe, but it was cool. Meanwhile, Eddie drops him on his neck. Generico hits the haluva kick on Eddie. He sends Rave into the turnbuckle with like a power bomb type of thing and dives onto Eddie out of nowhere, which is very classic Generico at the time, just like hitting that dive out of nowhere. Rave eventually hits the running knee and the Rave Clash for the win. It was, I think, a by the books opener, like in terms of just the structure, but some solid athletic spots. I actually thought Renaro was more impressive than Generico here, like just in this particular match, obviously not in general. Nothing went wrong, which is good for an ROH opener, but nothing special happened either. So it was, but I think it was pretty solid. Like as far as openers go, it was a very, very opener type of match, but I don't think that you can really complain too much about it. I don't think you could say like it didn't live up to expectations or anything like that. I think it did what it was going for mostly.
I thought it was a decent opener, nothing special. I basically agree with you. Like you said, it follows kind of a basic, traditional structure, kind of a little bit of healing. I thought Sal Renaro was really trying hard here, and like you covered most of the highlights, he did some really cool stuff. He also had a couple spots, like a couple strikes that didn't look that great. There was one spot where he does like a flipping cutter to or stunner type move to Rave, and Rave's going down way before Sal's coming down with grabbing his head even. And there's a spot late in the match where he's doing a springboard late in the match, and it feels like it must have been a botch because rather than show the hard cam, they show the ringside handheld cam that is way so close that you can't see what's going on. And typically, only Ring of Honor only does a cut like that when that's like the best available shot to hide something. But overall, I thought Sal was working really hard and did a lot of the coolest stuff in the match, which you went over, like the flip moonsault off the buckles. I felt like you could tell he was working hard, like he was taking hard bumps, even on just like stuff like getting his hair pulled. He would take like a pretty good, energetic bump off that. He was really trying to, get a spot here. And I know he was friends with a good friend with Jimmy Rave, so I'm sure, working with his friend, trying to get into the company. He's trying to put his best foot forward. He had the classic Saved by the Bell themed Saved by the Cell trunks on. And I do agree that Cell made more of an impression in this match than Generico, but also felt like he was getting more of the match than Generico. Like, even when Generico got the hot tag, like, Generico tagged back out to Sal, who had just played, like, the face in peril, very quickly during the hot tag, and I was like, okay, you go back, Sal. This really did feel like this was kind of like Sal's match to make an impression.
And you notice that, it worked because Sal ended up being a tag team champion in ROH later that year, and Generico ended up disappearing for a year and a half.
Exactly. It's all this match's fault or credit, Matt. All this match. But did you notice this one spot, which I noticed? So at one point in the match, Generico's going to go for a standing moonsault on Fast Eddie, and Eddie is like he's on his side selling instead of flat on his back, and Generico's about to do the moonsault, and then he looks behind him and he sees what Eddie's doing, that he's in no position to take the bump, and so Generico turns around and he makes this big comical production of like grabbing Eddie, laying him on his back, like pushing his arms by his side even to make kind of a joke out of it, and then he hits the standing moonsault. And I think Gabe's even saying like, what the heck was that, or something like that. But it was clear that like Generico was like, this fucking guy is doing some weird selling and taking himself out of position for my spot, so I'm just gonna like put him where I want, but kind of just try and turn it into something funny. And I thought that was a very cute moment. So yeah, decent match. I also noticed, Matt, someone threw a roll of toilet paper at a Rave, I think, before the match started. I think one roll of toilet paper, I think. The toilet paper watch continues.
Wow.
But that's another thing we're tracking. Cut to backstage where Alex Shelley talks about the bitter feud he's had with Generation Next. He goes over his fractured arm and almost beating Aries for the title. Shelley says he's called upon the angels to lighten his load, but no one has answered, so he has to do it on his own. He says tonight against Roderick Strong, it's an eye for an eye, or maybe a spine for a spine. So, Shelley with the called upon the angels thing, again, continuing to reference that, he keeps looking for help, no one's helping him, which they will really drive that point home later in the night.
He'll regret saying a spine for a spine, though.
Exactly, yes. So next up would be Loke defeated Cheech via pinfall in 4 minutes, 11 seconds with a small package. This was not much at all. This was a rare heel versus heel match where both guys act like a heel. Usually in a heel versus heel match, I find one heel will go, well, for this match, I'll kind of just basically more act like the babyface and take the role. This was a match where Loke at one point verbally shits on the Buffalo fans, but then so you go, oh, well, he's the heel in this match. But then later, Lacey distracts the ref, which allows Cheech and Clay to hit a big drop kick 619 double team. Cheech follows that up with a shooting star press, but Loke turns that into a small package for the win. So both guys being heels in different ways in this match. I felt kind of bad. Like, there wasn't much of this match, but like Cheech did a few nice moves and didn't do any botches. And I felt kind of bad that this was like, probably his most prominent match in Ring of Honor thus far. And he loses basically as hard as you can lose in the sense of he gets in a 4-minute match, he gets saved by his manager distracting the ref during a key near fall. He then gets to hit a big double team with his partner behind the ref's back. He then immediately hits a shooting star press, and he still loses immediately cleanly. And I felt like, wow, you're just not doing good. But Matt, before I get your opinion, I just want to say this is my favorite part of this whole match was Loke comes out wearing a new shirt that says "Fat, Drunk, and Pissed Off." He comes to the ring with a bottle of Jack Daniels. He takes a swig and he spits it in Cheech's face to start the match. So we're starting this kind of era of the Carnage crew. And I like that Gabe at one point on commentary points out how good of shape Loke had got himself into months earlier and how bad he physically looks now after the suspension, which is true. And he says the Carnage crew are best when they're fat, drunk, and pissed off. And I think Loke may have finagled one of the great moves of our time where he somehow got, we talked about last year, there was a time in 2004 where he got into really impressively good shape, and he clearly has lost that, and somehow he's gotten that to be sold as a good thing. He might be the only wrestler where he's gained a bunch of weight back, and they're like, you know what, now that he's fat, this is for the best. He's going to be even better now. So, good for him. That's something we can all dream of gaining a lot of weight and being like, you know what, this is an improvement in his life. He made the right decision.
At the same time, Carnage Crew's gone in a few months also.
Yeah, okay, maybe that ruins my... Yeah, maybe you completely just took out my point.
Yeah. I would also disagree with another point you made. I don't actually think this was Cheech's most prominent match, because he did have that match at Stalemate where he teamed with Deranged against Dixie and Angel Dust, and that was a longer and better match.
Yeah, you're right.
But if you are going to say this is his most prominent singles match, would you also say this was Loke's most prominent and possibly only singles match in ROH? Because I can't think of another one. There might have been.
At least not wearing a mask. At least as Loke.
Yes,
as
Loke.
a masked superstar.
Yeah, as Loke. Gabe also calls this a bonus attraction match, which, can you imagine being the fan who watches this and oh, bonus, Cheech versus Loke. I feel nothing against these guys, as wrestlers, but in terms of star power and match time and stuff, it feels like this match was put there just to show that this was a B show. Right? It's this is not the kind of match they would have put on the Manhattan Mayhem DVD. You know what I mean? But it was short. It was two guys that, one guy who really hadn't been doing anything at all, one guy who just never wrestled singles matches. And yeah, I mean, it's it was basically they did a few moves. Cheech did some cool moves. Gabe makes fun of Loke for being fat. And yeah, there's not a lot of enthusiasm behind a lot of the moves. Even Cheech's cool moves, you feel like they weren't done with their most oomph, except for maybe a shooting star press, which I did not expect in this match. I also
did not. He did the springboard headlock.
Yeah, I like that stuff. That stuff always gets me. I also did not expect the finish to just be a fluky roll up, right? That's just you figure Loke is fat, pissed off, he's just gonna kick this guy's ass, but nope, just oops, I just got hit with your move, but now I'm going to cradle you. I can't, this is a very difficult match to characterize. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. And it seemed to be there, like I said, just to let people know this is not the most important show that we've done in a while.
And also, just to make clear, DeVito is not on the show. According to Gabe on commentary, he says DeVito isn't here tonight because he had to take extra hours at his regular job to make up for the lost wages from the Carnage Crew's enforced Ring of Honor suspension that they suffered when they lost in the Scramble Cage to the Ring Crew Express and had to take 90 days off. So the fact that Loke worked the show and DeVito didn't, I guess that tells you, Matt, a wrinkle in the Carnage Crew characters. Loke has a higher paying job than DeVito, apparently.
I also... I see the one missed opportunity they had with the Carnage Crew. They always complained about their crappy jobs. I wish they just bothered saying what they were. I want to know. What is their shitty job?
Garbage man. Works at the docks,
depends on what city you live in. You can make a lot of money being a sanitation worker. In New York City, you can with the overtime and the benefits. Just saying.
And I realized my docks was a bad example too, because I realized that some of those long working on the docks, depending on what you do, you can make pretty good money. So
yes, and also much respect to sanitation workers. That is a really important and tough job, and I really appreciate you. If any of you are listening, definitely. that is a job, and you deserve to get paid a lot of money. As do all workers. But yeah. But no, but it's true. In NYC, taking the test to get into the Department of Sanitation, it only comes up once every few years, and it's very competitive actually, because it's a pretty coveted job.
Wow, a test. I guess there would be, but I just never thought of that. A test to be a sanitation worker. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, they do a lot of,
I kind of want to see that test.
yeah, I mean, they're garbage collectors, but they also do a lot of other stuff too.
Yeah, I imagine nowadays it's changing in different ways too. Anyway, we return backstage to a great promo, great in a weird way. Matt was so excited about this promo that he was ahead of me watching the show, and he clipped the promo so I would watch it immediately after he saw it because he was so excited. And it's definitely a slice of something. So I'll try and do this justice as best I can. We return backstage. Gabe is behind the camera. He wants to know, Colt Cabana is there, and Gabe wants to know when Colt is going to shoot Good Times, Great Memories for the show. But Colt's not interested. He's looking for CM Punk. He finds him in a locker room listening to music. A somber, serious Colt then tells Punk that their tag match tonight against Nigel McGuinness and Chad Collier is big, and he needs all the help he can get from Punk. Punk says yeah, and says Colt doesn't have to keep repeating it. He knows. Colt just ignores this and gets more and more agitated, going over all the times he's helped Punk so far in Ring of Honor. Punk again at this point says, like, I don't know where you're going with this. Yeah, I get it. Colt, getting more angry, says he has a problem. Ring of Honor has a locker room cancer. America has a cancer, and it's Nigel McGuinness. Punk finally interrupts him, and he says, look, problems are me trying to wrestle Austin Aries for the world title. Problems are me having to go through a policeman, our favorite phrase, Matt, like Roderick Strong first. And then Colt at this point interrupts Punk. He's just screaming now that I'm serious, Punk. You know, Nigel's getting on my nerves. I wanted to have straight matches with him, but Nigel cheated. Punk at this point now finally starts screaming back. Colt screams so loud that it's blowing out the audio on this DVD. But he's screaming that, you know, Punk's always about himself, and this one time he needs Punk to help him as a friend, as a Second City Saint, as a Chicagoan, as his best friend. And then after that huge screaming promo, there's a moment of silence. Punk then says, you're going to yell at me? And Colt sheepishly says, please, and gives a goofy grin and this aw shucks expression. Punk then says, I told you I'd be there for you. I'm going to be there for you tonight. They walk away. Punk puts his arm around Colt, and then they shake hands. Matt, this was insanely weird tonally. Colt being insanely mad and over the top in the content of his promo, acting like Punk was hesitant to help him when Punk in this promo and before this promo, to my knowledge, has never once been like hesitant to help Colt, especially in this match. And then all followed by the weird emotional ramp down at the end where Colt goes from being like furious to being like, please, wink. And I can only guess that they did the promo this way because they felt like we need to plant seeds for like the Punk Colt match that's going to come in months, you know, where, you know, they're going to do that story where, you know, Punk won't show up for Good Times, Great Memories and try and build up a little tension for the final match Punk has. But like otherwise, I don't get why Colt was this angry and they acted like they were trying to build some weird Punk Colt tension that they had never teased before.
It didn't make any sense, but I loved it. I'm extremely glad it exists. I think it's so entertaining and ridiculous. Like, I really can't complain about it. Like, it's weird. Like, it's weird in a enjoyable way. But yes, total nonsense. Like, he starts screaming. He's like, stop saying I. Punk starts by saying, okay, I'll help. Then I guess the implication is that Punk deep down knew that Punk deep down didn't really think that the Nigel situation was serious, right? Like he kind of had the sense, even though Punk was saying that he took it seriously, and he got Punk to basically admit that Colt's problem wasn't as serious as Punk's. But then you're right, he starts screaming, but then he ramps it down and does the sheepish thing, almost to indicate like he wasn't actually angry, he was just pretending to be angry to get Punk's attention, right? Like, yeah. But whatever. I mean, it didn't make any sense, but it was a hoot to watch, and you know. Of all the things involving CM Punk and Colt Cabana on this DVD, this one was the best.
Yeah, I agree. I want to say, like, for people that are fans of Colt Cabana, like, it's worth seeking out this promo because, like, yes, Colt Cabana's done other, like, serious promos and feuds in his wrestling career, but, like, I can't recall another time Colt's ever been like this. Like, literally screaming out the top of his lungs, just trying to sell being absolutely furious and, you know, calling Nigel McGuinness a cancer to America. Like, if you're a big Colt Cabana fan, this is definitely something you should see.
Well, just put it on Twitter because there's no way for anyone to seek this out. It's impossible.
Yeah, I should throw it up on Twitter or something. Yeah.
But yeah, maybe if we showed this to Punk and Cabana now, they would make up. They'd be like, that's how easy it is. We just, Colt just like, please.
They should have done that like right after like whatever settlement or whatever they reached when they were suing each other or Colt was suing for like lawyer fees. Like he should have just after the settlement just like shrugged like, "Oh, are we cool?" and just walk away. But
exactly.
That brings us to the next match. Homicide defeated Kevin Steen via pinfall in 12 minutes 44 seconds after he hit a lariat. We've talked about before, Steen has talked about on various shoot interviews he's done, because he's done like a million. His first Ring of Honor run was not very good. He himself does not consider it good. And has talked about that was the run where he discovered that his personality was an essential component of his act. And I feel like this match, you really see that, because mechanically, like, Steen does some cool offense. I would say Homicide probably gives him like 40% of the match, which at this point in their careers where Steen was scraping just to get onto these shows and Homicide was a big star, that's pretty generous. And, there's some fairly decent action, and Steen does hit some...
Steen's moonsault in this match is like one of the best moonsaults I've ever seen from him.
It is a glorious, like, graceful, smooth, buttery smooth, like, the rotation moonsault, just really nice, absolutely. And I felt like, but watching this match, just seeing him do some of his cool offense and barely doing any emoting or at all, like, Steen, absolutely, I agree with him. Like, his personality, whether he's a face or a heel, that's like an essential part of him. Like, he has been in matches where it's just about, hitting big moves and being cool. And he's had some really great ones. But I think in general, you don't come to see Kevin Steen to do a, like, match with no story and no, emotional investment from him and no character work. And this match, like, it's decent. It's a little bit above average, but I don't think it's anything special. And I also feel like there's this weird moment there's a couple of weird moments in this match, like late in the match, or deep in the match at least. The whole match had been going at like a good medium tempo. All of a sudden things kind of start slow to a crawl for a while, where Homicide just puts Steen in multiple submissions, I think seemingly to try and get the crowd behind Steen like you would, but only kind of half works because Homicide's the way bigger star at this point than Steen is, and it just kind of slows the match down. And also, Homicide isn't this is probably the least heelish Homicide's been in months and months. Like, he's kind of playing along, playing with the crowd a bit. He's smiling more. This is kind of like the most laid back, I would say, like playful, I would say, Homicide's been in months. And so that just kind of doesn't work. And I would also say there's a bit of a weird vibe in the sense that there's a few moments in this match where there's like, between moves, there's these very brief but little awkward pauses where it's almost like whoever's gotten control of the match is trying to figure out what to do next. Like, it just felt kind of off a little. It was not a bad match, but it felt kind of off to me. And I can see again why Kevin Steen just felt like he wasn't really himself on this run. But what do you think, Matt?
I agree with you that, like, the slow down part in the middle is kind of what took the match down for me. I think that, the ending was pretty good. The early pace was good. I think if they had just kept up that pace, it would have been a perfectly fine match, or a good match. But that when it got slow and dull, I think, it took me out of it. I didn't really mind Homicide, acting more loose and fun. I know that's not really what they were trying to get over, but, like, just as far as pure just entertainment, I enjoyed seeing Homicide in that mode, kind of playing with the crowd a little bit and, getting distracted by a fan, which kind of allowed Steen to take over. But it also makes sense that the crowd was cheering Homicide. Like you said, Homicide's a star. And as far as I could tell, even though Steen wasn't really presented with much of a character up until now, he certainly hasn't been presented as a baby face, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it hasn't really been presented as anything. I mean, we go to that anecdote I think we talked about on an earlier show where one of the early Ring of Honor shows, Steen, like, asked Gabe, am I a heel or a babyface? And apparently he says Gabe just told him just wrestle. Like,
yeah.
Like, didn't really give him any guidance.
Yeah, which I'm okay, so he did what he was told, right?
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that part. I also have to say this, one other thing I would add, because I pretty much agree with your assessment on the match. How many wrestlers can you think of that look more different than Kevin Steen does than from here. You know what I mean? Like, he just looks like a different guy. Just like, and actually, by the end of 2007, I would say he looked completely different than he does here.
Yeah, he definitely had, that very, like, literal kind of, in a weird way, baby face, like the baby found in the face. But it's funny, like, it's funny watching this match. Did you get, like, have you ever thought of this during this era of Kevin Steen where people were harping on Kevin Steen being, like, overweight and wearing a t-shirt at this point? Like, he
looks
doesn't
skinny.
Look that over. Yeah, exactly. Like, maybe he has a little bit of softness in his midsection, but he by like the Kevin Steen you see in WWE, even at like probably some of his better times of health in WWE, is way more overweight than this Kevin Steen that initially got ragged on by people.
He's bigger. I would say. I won't use the term overweight, but he's obviously much bigger in all of his successful eras. But he just looks like a fresh-faced, athletic youngster here that happens to be wearing a t-shirt.
A couple other things I noticed in the match. Super hard lariat from Homicide. It looks like it hit Steen right in the side of the head, and we actually get a rare post-match instant replay of it, which I thought that's how good the lariat was. They had to do like a weird for like the third match on the show, a not particularly important match. They were like, we're going to show this on replay. Gabe explains why Julius Smokes isn't at the show. Gabe says it's because Julius Smokes is a wanted man in this part of the country, which,
oh my God.
I also thought there was a cute moment. Did you notice early on, Gabe shouts out that he just saw some girls who used to hit the front row of every ECW show, and Gabe seems like genuinely
touched,
happy to see them there. Yeah, he's like, hey, they're here. Like, and he gives them like this little shout out. I thought, oh, that's kind of a cute moment. It kind of reminds you of Gabe's ECW roots. That he's like, oh yeah, like Gabe was a big part of that company in different ways.
Yeah, no, it was really that was nice.
So, moving on to the Ring of Honor Tag Team title match, BJ Whitmer and Jimmy Jacobs successfully defended the titles when they defeated the Ring Crew Express of Dunn and Marcos in 13 minutes, 26 seconds when Jacobs pinned Dunn after he hit the Doomsday Rana. Matt, I mistakenly said that the Cheech match was the most prominent match of his career. In some ways, you'd have to say, I mean, probably in terms of their moment of glory up to this point in Ring of Honor, winning Scramble Cage is the more prominent win. But I can't remember a time that the Ring Crew Express has gotten like 13 minutes, let alone in a tag title match. Definitely one of the most prominent matches they had in Ring of Honor. What did you think about them getting like a real shot here at kind of a serious match?
Yeah, one of like the biggest chance for them to showcase themselves in like a real match, right? Like that's sort of like how you could say it. I didn't love this. I think there were good things about it. And they definitely worked really hard. But the crowd, for completely understandable reasons, didn't buy it. I mean, they were definitely in favor of Dunn and Marcos. They were cheering for them big time early in the match. And, Whitmer and Jacobs did some subtle heel stuff because they jumped them before the bell. Even though they did follow the code of honor. Like, they shook their hands and then they jumped them. They were, the Ring Crew Express, they got to do a little bit of offense early. They hit their high-fiving Bulldogs early. They kind of settle down with some basic, like Jacobs versus the Ring Crew Express, like doing arm drags and stuff like that. And Gabe talked about the rags to riches story of Dunn and Marcos, saying they weren't very good when they came in, and now they're fighting for the tag titles. Although I do say, after this, they go down the card, and you don't really see much of them after 2005. So this is sort of like, this match might actually be their peak. I mean, I guess they do get to do the Carnage Crew feud, but even like that, like really most of those matches are squashes.
My favorite part of when Gabe said that is right as he's saying that, Dunn kind of half bodges a move where he flips with the ropes and his foot catches on one of the ropes. And I was like, just as Gabe says, like, oh, they weren't very good, but now they've improved. And I like the Ring Crew Express, but it was like the worst time for him to make that quote.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They also do a lot of weird comedy stuff. Like there's this whole sequence in the middle of the match where Whitmer comes in and Ring Crew Express grab his arms and do double air guitar with his arms. Then Jacobs he starts doing an air guitar of his own, I guess, to like suck them in because they put up their hands to high five him. And when they do that, it means they let go of Whitmer. And then Whitmer and Jacobs kick each of their hands. And it was pretty convoluted, and I didn't really think it was funny. I guess nice try, though. But then after that, like, the Ring Crew Express grabbed their hands in like a huss position because they'd both been kicked. And then Jimmy husses at them. And then he tells Whitmer to huss, and Whitmer refuses, so Jacobs kicks him in the hand, getting him to huss. And then Whitmer is pissed off, calls Jacobs a little bastard, goes after him, and that allows Dunn and Marcos to attack Whitmer. And I mean, I just like, well, this is a twist, and I don't know, it didn't work for me. I don't know about you, but I don't think it helped the match. I guess, but I guess they were trying to do something different. I don't know. But at that point, Whitmer takes over, and he's getting the heat on Marcos, and that's what a lot of the match is. At one point, Prazak is talking about the success of Whitmer and Jacobs, and they say they've put a lot of teams away with the Doomsday Rana, but we can confirm they've only put one team away with that move, right? They've only won with that move once. But they get a few near falls. They do some frequent tags. The drill. It felt like after the whole comedy thing, the crowd's enthusiasm got pretty dulled. They were pretty quiet for most of it, and the work on Marcos was pretty methodical. I don't think Marcos had enough sympathy from the crowd to really sustain it. But they do build up to the hot tag, which is not that hot, and Dunn comes in. And, he does some big moves, big belly to back on Jacobs onto his head, blocks the Contra Code, hits the Gory Bomb for 2. Whitmer breaks that up. Marcos hits Whitmer in the back. Whitmer no-sells it. So Dunn and Marcos do a double-team combo, like swinging DDT on Whitmer. They do a kick into a assisted slice bread on Jacobs. And the assisted senton gets 2 before Whitmer pulls Dunn off of Jacobs. Marcos goes for the senton off of Dunn's shoulders on the top, but Whitmer cuts them off and hits an exploder on Marcos off the top, off of Dunn's shoulders, which I don't know, that was pretty cool, I have to say. And Marcos rolls out of the ring, and Whitmer exploders Dunn onto the turnbuckle, and they hit the Doomsday Rana and get the 3 count. I don't know. I just, the pacing was off. I didn't like the comedy. I thought the crowd was quiet. Like I said, it wasn't all bad. It certainly wasn't a bad match, I would say, but it just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, I would say this was, again, like slightly above average, not like, not that special. This match kind of made me feel like a jerk in the sense of, I feel like, we both are fans of the Ring Crew Express on this podcast. And I feel like a lot of times maybe not a lot of times, but a few times when we've watched like short Ring Crew Express matches, which are most Ring Crew Express matches in Ring of Honor. They're usually in multi-tags or scrambles, and they're usually, or if they are working as singles matches, like 4 or 5 minutes where they do a lot of selling. And there would be a few times where I would say like, oh, they should, I would love to see what they could do in a longer match. And I feel like I got what I wanted, and then I didn't really, at the end of it, I went, you know what, maybe they're better working like 6-minute matches, because I felt like we didn't see anything different from the Ring Crew Express. They basically did everything we've ever seen them do, stuff I've enjoyed, and then they just stretched it out for a 13-minute match instead of like 5 or 6 minutes in a scramble or something. And for whatever reason, I feel like I just liked it more. I liked it when it's condensed. I feel like nothing was really added to it by it being in a longer, more traditional format tag match for some reason. I agree that like, when BJ and Jimmy were in control for that one sequence, it kind of got a little bit boring. I feel like something I've noticed watching all these matches is I think one of the hardest things for tag teams to get good at is like being in control of the match in the middle for a long sequence and like keeping it engaging for some reason. That seems to, even some really good tag teams have some trouble doing that sometimes. It was a bit of a novelty to see like the Ring Crew Express isolate Jimmy Jacobs early on and like actually be in control of a match and have someone else be like the underdog for a couple of minutes. So that was like a bit of like, oh, that's a weird, neat thing to see that you've like never seen from these guys before. But yeah, for the most part, it didn't feel like, oh, like a big new world for the Ring Crew Express. It felt more just like I've seen this shorter and more condensed. And I guess my other takeaway from this match was, like, going to all the points you made, you did a really good job of recapping, like, what Whitmer and Jacobs did in this match. Like, I feel like, I know they were not initially in the plans. Jacobs and Whitmer were thrown together because of the Dan Moff firing, but, like, they still don't really have, like, an identity. Like, I don't know what they're supposed to be. So when they come out, Jacobs is doing the Jungle Boy thing where he's on BJ's shoulders and he's doing the Huss. And then, like you said, they then jump the Ring Crew Express before the bell, which feels like almost like a heel thing, or at least like a really aggressive ass kicker tag team thing, which, that was basically like a Moff and Whitmer spot, but it seems kind of weird with Jimmy doing it. And then, like you said, later in the match, we get like really goofy comedy with everyone hussing, including BJ, and then BJ chasing Jacobs and calling him like, you little shit or whatever. Like, I don't know if they're supposed to be a heel tag team, a face tag team. I don't know if we're supposed to take them seriously. I don't know if they're supposed to be like an odd couple. I don't know if they're supposed to, how much comedy we're supposed to, like, it just seems like they don't really have a well-defined kind of identity or place in the company other than just they're the tag team champions and sometimes Jimmy husses. And
I guess if I were to say their identity, which is, it's just that, Whitmer respects Jimmy Jacobs' toughness. Jacobs is trying to be a little more serious, but he's also really annoying to Whitmer. I guess that would be the closest thing you could say to their identity.
I think this is the first match where they even show annoyance, though, but maybe that will continue going on. But, like, before this, it just felt like, oh, they're a team that's on the same page. But
did the comedy work for you?
It was, I probably liked it maybe a little bit more than you, but at the same time, it felt kind of, again, out of place. Like, I don't know. I don't know. This match didn't really just click completely for me, and I basically agree with you about the whole match. It's just, not the best of any of those guys. But moving on, Roderick Strong defeated Alex Shelley via pinfall in 20 minutes, 2 seconds after he hit a half Nelson backbreaker. Before I get to the match, there was a little bit of promo work before the match. Right as the bell rings for the match, Austin Aries music hits. He comes to the ring. He grabs the mic and introduces himself to Buffalo. He calls himself the guy who beat Samoa Joe not once, but twice, and the guy who made Bryan Danielson pack his bags and leave Ring of Honor, as well as the guy who defended the Ring of Honor title all over the world. He says tonight he'll break Spanky in two and continue his reign. Aries then says he's also the guy who took Alex Shelley's spot in Generation Next as the leader. Aries gives Shelley one last chance to leave the ring before Roderick Strong breaks his back tonight. Shelley then says he'll take his chances, and he jabs Aries for having a bad neck, saying Spanky's finish focuses on that region. Aries is mad, says his neck is just fine. He doesn't know where this rumor got started. He takes a swing at Shelley, but Shelley avoids it and fires back, and then the match is on.
I feel like the whole point of the promo was to mention the neck thing.
Yeah. And then Aries sells his neck as he goes to the back. Yeah, I guess they thought that maybe would add some extra juice to the main event. We can talk about whether it did or didn't at that point. But yeah, it really feels like just it was to talk about the neck. But as for the match, you would expect this match to be good. Matt, I was surprised how much I like this. I think this is a hidden gem. I would call this outright like great. I would say this is like a 4-star match. And I'm a bit more strict on stuff. I think this is an outright great match. We saw them have a match a few shows ago, and I think we both liked it, but I think we both kind of shared the criticism where for two guys that are supposed to be feuding, there wasn't that much hatred. I feel like this match was almost like they heard our criticism and like responded to it, because the first third of this match is one of the wildest crowd brawls I think up to this point in Ring of Honor history. Maybe not the wildest, but it's in the conversation. Shelley throws Strong into the front row no fewer than, I would say, I think I counted at least 4 times, seemingly like no regard for the fans. Like every time, like he's not telling the fans to get out of the way, the guy's Strong is just landing in the fans' laps. Shelley sometimes is like running over and flying over the barricade to get to Strong afterwards, like doing flip dives off the barricade or running crossbodies. They brawl around the building, and it looks awesome because, as we mentioned earlier, it's in like a friggin' hockey rink, and the boards and the glass is still up. At one point, Shelley whips Strong into the boards, and unfortunately, the camera does not catch it. We just hear it. But then we do see them fight at the boards, and Shelley shell shocks Roderick Strong into like the hockey glass, which, again, so cool. There's lots of hate in this too. It's not just cool to see what the moves, but like there's copious spitting, there's trash talking. The strikes are pretty damn hard. It's everything I wanted from these guys in their first match here. Then when they get back into the ring, it does become more of a traditional match, and I don't think it's ever quite as good as the outside brawling stuff. But I will say, even there, it's different than a lot of Ring of Honor matches, because I find a lot of Ring of Honor matches that do an opening match crowd brawl, when they get in the ring, it's almost like a separate match. Like, all the hatred is gone, and they almost like they just start the match from square one and then do the regular match that we're going to do. And I felt like in this match, there was still some hatred between the two guys once they got in the ring. But more importantly, what I really liked is I felt like they were really selling, like, that they had already kind of been through a war in the brawl. Like, they were doing more, they were letting the moves breathe more between each move than you would typically see in a Ring of Honor match. Like, they were selling exhaustion between moves more often, I think, than you would see in a Ring of Honor match. Like, they were really selling this like they had already really hurt each other. And, you know, and it's good wrestling. Even if it's not quite as different and as exciting as the brawl on the outside, it's still really good wrestling in the ring. I had a little quibbles. You know, there's a couple little moments in the ring that feel a little more generic, that feel a little bit more at the level of their first match, which was good, but not great like I feel this match. And it is also a little weird that during a time when they're really trying to get over the Stronghold, that Roderick Strong just does the regular backbreaker and not the Stronghold during the match. He'll do the Stronghold after the match. But, you know, maybe it's because they didn't want to have Shelley, get out of the Stronghold, I guess. Yeah, but it seems weird, especially when the whole story of this match ends up being about the back, that they didn't go to that. But, there's so many little moments I like in this match. I like there's a moment, I like the Shelley trash talk at one point. He goes, "Come on, Roderick, I thought you were going to break my back," which telegraphs something for later. I love that then he takes a sip of water from some fan's bottle and then he spits it on Strong, and then he tosses the bottle, and it must have hit someone off camera in the crowd, because we hear the crowd laughing, and Shelley just like turns and looks, and he just goes like, "I'm sorry," and he just kind of gives like a shrug, like he kind of doesn't really care, which I thought was hilarious. But overall, yeah, I really like this match a lot. I thought this was a great match and like a real hidden gem, I thought.
Yeah, this is one of those rare matches that I liked probably significantly less than you. Not that I didn't think it was good, but I actually did like the Final Showdown match more.
Wow.
I thought it was I liked that match a lot more than you did also at the time. Even when we reviewed it, I thought it was I was a big fan of it. So it's not as much of an insult as it might sound, but I agree with you about the early part of the match. I thought that the opening brawl, I really liked how Shelley kept throwing him over the guardrail repeatedly. Like they'd throw him over the guardrail, they'd come back, he'd throw him back over the guardrail. I really enjoyed that. I think just my criticism of the match, and it's, not really criticism in that I don't know if there was really anything they could do about it, but it felt like they were going for like an epic. Like, it seemed very long. But it felt too long to me. Like, it felt like the crowd was quiet for a lot of it. They worked hard. They seemed exhausted. I certainly appreciate the storytelling in the match. The flow just wasn't there for me. There was a little bit of meandering. It just felt like. So I don't know, like, what I would say they should have done differently, except maybe made it a little bit shorter. I guess, but sometimes it's good to give a match time. So I don't necessarily think that they made the wrong decision. It just didn't work for me. One thing I will notice, like you mentioned, like the strikes, and yeah, they definitely hit some hard strikes. But one thing I will notice is that Roderick at this time, his punches were probably the worst of his strikes. Like, his punches did not look very good in 2005, which surprised me because, you think of Roderick as a good striker, and pretty much everything else he did already looked very good. But I think his punches still needed work, and, they definitely improved. But Shelley took a lot of the early part of this match in terms of getting a lot of offense. And I thought, like, probably more offense than I remember him getting. The other thing that I noticed is they spit on each other a lot. They also spit on each other a lot at the Final Showdown, but it's just like, this match is a germaphobe's nightmare. He also hits a babyface eye poke, which is not one that you see often. I don't know. Like, one other thing, and I know I've mentioned this before, it does seem like they maybe could have done more with Shelley as a babyface if they were really willing to go for it with him. For whatever reason, they decided to go the opposite route. This is pretty close to the end of the line for him as far as a babyface, because he's away for a couple shows. Then he comes back. He does a couple of like nondescript matches, and then he's a heel again. So I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess they were already going to turn him heel by this point. But I don't know. Would you have? I don't know. I mean, now that we've seen pretty much all of Shelley's babyface run, would you have turned him heel, or would you have maybe had him become more solid as a babyface and become triumphant at a certain point?
I feel like this show, even though, like you said, there were some quiet points in this match, but I felt like on points during this match and on the last like couple shows, Shelley was starting to get like a little bit hotter reactions than I would expect for his place on the card, like babyface reactions. I feel like people were getting into him as a babyface. Yeah, I feel like, you know, there was more to get from him as a babyface, and I also feel like you could have still done like the heel story 6 months down the line. Like if you want heel Shelley, you could have had a thing where he's a face and, you know, like maybe eventually someone does finally trust him and they have like a babyface run and then he finally turns on them. Like it felt like he was just starting to get momentum as a babyface and people were just starting to finally go, okay, Alex Shelley is a babyface now. And then they do the turn. But
yeah, I mean, I guess, again, the other thing is that, you know, Generation X also turns face right at the same time, so that's the other problem with it, of course.
Yeah, so unless you're keeping them very far apart, it's kind of hard to have Generation X be faces and Alex Shelley also be a face, unless, again, they just are never involved at all, ever with each other from that point on. And as we know, they will be involved with each other quite a bit going forward. So
they could have just not turned Generation X face at that moment. There was no, like, it didn't feel like there was a clamor for it, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Couple other notes. Gabe says Jack Evans is currently in Japan, which is why he isn't here tonight. And Matt, I don't know if you caught this. This is a weird thing. So after Shelley shell shocks Strong into the hockey glass, and then they start walking back towards the ring, Shelley says to somebody, "Fucking wipe that off." And I don't know what he's referring to or what that could possibly be referring to. Like, I
think he almost slipped on something on the floor.
Huh.
That's how I took it.
For a guy that spits and blows so much snot rockets, he should talk about slippery surfaces. Actually, that was interesting. You were right about, like, there's so much spit in this match, and we know Shelley generally does, like, a lot of spitting and snot blowing spots. Matt, if you were, like, a guy like Alex Shelley and you did that, do you think you have to have, like, a conversation with your opponent every night, like, where you ask them, like, is it okay if I spit on you or blow snot on you? Like, how weird is that? Like,
yeah.
Do you think he does that, or do you think he just assumes people will take it and go, it's wrestling? Because that has to, if you're giving a conversation, that has to be like a weird conversation, and someone sooner or later has to have said no. Like, I don't want you to spit on me tonight, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I guess there's a lot of, you know, just like sweat and, you know, accidental spit and like bodily fluids like that are exchanged. So maybe it is just sort of like considered just the cost of doing business, and so it's not even a question. Maybe I would bet nowadays it's probably more of something people would want to make sure they get consent for than maybe in the past.
Yeah, I guess everything back then was fair game. Like, because I don't think the Nasty Boys were asking anyone, like, can we rub our armpits in your face? Or Rikishi was asking anyone, is it okay if I rub my ass in your face? Like, I am sure it's just assumed, like, look, these are over spots. You're going to take them.
Yeah, I mean, they're very nasty, as you well know.
Yeah. They're just plain nasty. But so after the match, Aries returns to the ring and he attacks Shelley's back with a pipe. Strong very briefly puts Shelley in the stronghold, which he didn't do during the match. The pipe attack continues and no wrestler comes to Shelley's aid, although refs end up surrounding the ring, but they're too scared to come in. Aries and Strong eventually make their way to the back and the refs attend to Shelley. One ref makes the dreaded X symbol, Matt, so you know it's real. And then the crowd doesn't take this seriously at all. They're not really reacting loudly. They're not really acting like this is a scary real thing. A stretcher is wheeled to the ring. We'll see more of this. It gets almost comical, but I would say I felt like this beatdown, I don't know what you feel like, Matt, was not severe enough to warrant like them acting like this was seriously injuring a guy and requiring a stretcher and putting him out for weeks or months. But that's what it was supposed to be.
Well, I think maybe the fact that Shelley kept talking to them throughout the whole thing made it seem less intense. But I mean, they did knock him off a stretcher multiple times and continue to kick him in the back and beat it with a pipe. So, I mean, theoretically, you could say that it did seem like it was extremely injurious.
Yeah, it gets, but at this point, we hadn't get the two follow-ups we'll get to. We just had this initial attack, and already they were, like, breaking out the stretcher.
I suppose
Dave
so.
Meltzer had Dave Meltzer had something to write about this. He wrote, Expect Roderick Strong to get a big push from this point forward. They ran an angle where he put Alex Shelley out of action with a series of backbreakers, and Shelley did a stretcher job. It was to both get over the backbreaker as a feared move and to explain Shelley being gone. Shelley had planned on spending the summer in Europe working regularly. Because 0-1 wanted him in the middle of when he's going, that fell through. Shelley will be off for a few weeks to make sense of the already done angle. Of course, Sapolsky has to feel like Jim Cornette, because after shooting this angle, Shelley will be appearing unhurt on Sunday Night Heat this coming weekend, jobbing for Simon Dean. Matt, I always feel like Dave always during this era overestimates like how damaging it would be for an ROH wrestler to like do a job on Sunday Night Heat. Like no one in watching Ring of Honor was like buying this angle as legitimate and was like going, wait, he's on Sunday Night Heat? Well, clearly now I don't believe that this injury is serious. Like I think Ring of Honor fans very clearly separated Ring of Honor from other promotions and what wrestlers did in them.
Ring of Honor fans in particular, who all very well know that wrestling is very fake.
Exactly. Yes. And the idea that, like, this is just ruining Gabe's angle, he's got to be furious about this. Is like, no.
Yes, and I apologize. Wrestling is very predetermined, character-based, not fake. Sorry about that.
The matches are the outcomes are predetermined, but the injuries are real, Matt. PSAs have informed me of that.
Don't try this at home.
Exactly. My C3 vertebrae fragmented into my spinal column. Speaking of that guy, that heartwarming guy we were talking about earlier. Cut to clips from the trios tournament as a Gabe voiceover tells us that it's intermission and he has an update on Jay Lethal. He says Jay's recovering well, but has not received medical clearance yet, but he will be at Ring of Honor's New York show next week, and he vows revenge. He definitely will achieve some revenge on that show.
And we know that even before this DVD came out, Keith Lipinski knew that Jay Lethal was going to be at the New York Ring of Honor event.
Much like the internet, he had all the scoops, brother. And we cut back to the ring at this point as refs and Ring of Honor students put Alex Shelley on a stretcher. Aries comes down and he throws Shelley off the stretcher. He flips it on the floor. He and Strong toss Alex into the barricade. Shelley screams, "Don't fucking touch me, you careless prick." Which I don't know if he was trying to make it seem like a shoot or something, because it seems like careless seemed like kind of a weird phrasing there. Like,
right?
Yeah,
they took care to injure him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's swearing at him a lot. To me, it was kind of like he was trying to sell it as real, because he was like just sitting there swearing at him and staring at him and being really angry, just being like, "You fucking asshole!" Like, and we cut to the embassy backstage. Prince Nana congratulates Jimmy Raven and Fast Eddie on their win tonight. He wants them to go for the tag team titles. Nana says he's going to take them to New York tonight, and they're going to party like it's 1979. I don't know how exactly how you party 1979 style, but Rave is worried about AJ Styles. Jade Chung at this point tries to talk, but Nana screams at her. Rave then says, "I don't think I should have to wrestle AJ Styles ever again. I beat him already last time we wrestled." Nana says to focus right now just on the tag titles. Don't focus on AJ. Nana roughly grabs Jade Chung's arm, and she's selling pain in a way that's pretty uncomfortable. He tells her to get her ass to the hotel and make sure the bath water is ready, that the soap is in there, and that she's in there. And then he just shoves her aside super roughly. And at that point, the men walk away. We hear Fast Eddie off camera tell Nana to get Jay to use the lavender soap because it's good for his skin. And for some reason, that made me laugh at the idea that, like, Fast Eddie's very aware of what's good for his skin. Like, I hope that's real.
I'll tell you what made me laugh. The fact that they're planning on going to New York City, which is hours away from Buffalo. Even if they took a private jet, it's still like they still have to get there, drive from the airport into the city. Like, but like by car, you're talking about like 6 hours. Then, on top of that, they have time to take a bath first. And, like, are they all going to take baths? Like, is just Nana going to take a bath? Are they going to take a bath together? And then they're going to head to New York City. Like, by the time they get there, it's going to be, like, 3 a.m. And that's if they fly, probably. Like, what are they planning on doing in New York City tonight?
I love like the Nana's go-to is always like, because now he's basically doing to Jay Chung what he was doing to the Outcast Killers, like with the make me a bath. I love that Nana has one go-to thing for like degrading, and it's get me a bath. Like that's the most degrading thing he can think of, at least that you can do to someone like in a hotel. Like
wait, it doesn't but it's not like run my bathwater. He's basically just saying like go hang out at the hotel and let the water fill up the bathtub.
And he's always like, get the soap, get the bubbles in there. Like he's very concerned with the bubbles and making sure that he doesn't have to wait a second to get into the bath once he opens that door. And
well, also when he would talk about the wonders of Ghana, he would also talk about like the finest soaps and stuff. he loves bathing.
Nana, you always see him at Lush at the mall. You know, you're at the food court. He's always just looking at those bath bombs. He's hugely into it, Matt. But
he's a very clean man.
we cut to Alex Shelley backstage on the stretcher still. This time he's lying on his stomach because I guess his back is hurt. Aries and Strong attack him yet again and beat him down. At this point, this was the last time we got a beatdown. I kind of at this point just wanted to see this happen like 5 more times. Like go all the way and make this just ridiculous. Where like after every 10 minutes we just go backstage and they are attacking and somehow Shelley is still not yet at the ambulance. Like he's only like 5 more feet away every time.
Yeah, I was gonna say if they could actually like get an ambulance like WWF could with Austin and Bret Hart. They could have done that. They could have done shot vignettes in the hospital. I mean, if this was like Monday Night Raw, they probably would have done all that stuff. But now I'm also thinking that the Embassy's entrance music should have been Splish Splash by Bobby Darin. At least just like one time, you know.
You're full of musical references tonight. De La Soul, Splish Splash. I think one more I was forgetting here. There's a great bonus podcast out of this where you just listen to the songs Matt recommends.
Yeah, listen, I like making up unfunny parody songs. It's what I do. That is a thing that I do.
That's the thing typically, Matt, that's the thing that most people that make parody songs do without intending it.
No,
they make unfunny
but deep down I actually do think mine are funny.
And something that is good as a Matt Feuerstein parody song, the 3-way elimination match. Davey Andrews defeated Shane Hagedorn and the New York City Masked Superstar in 4:59. I believe the New York Masked Superstar was Loke pulling double duty.
What is the deal with this Masked Superstar thing that they've been doing all the time? I don't get it.
Yeah, isn't it weird? Like this one too. Like the last 2 times he was doing, like he was representing cities that the market he was in should like dislike. Like if he was in like Chicago, he'd be the Wisconsin Superstar and stuff like that. This time he's the Masked New York Superstar, and he's in Buffalo. Like Matt, you live in New York State. Does Buffalo hate New York City? Like.
I not that I'm aware of, but I guess it would make some sense that there'd be like a sports rivalry. I've never really heard. I mean, there is a thing about upstate sort of resenting New York City, like in terms of getting so much attention and resources from the state and stuff like that. But you know, I don't know of a particular Buffalo New York City feud. But I don't know. I'm sure people who are into sports probably are more aware than I am.
So for this match, the 2 eliminations, Shane Hagedorn eliminated the New York City Masked Superstar via pinfall in 1:15, and then Davey Andrews eliminated Shane Hagedorn via submission with a face lock in 4:59. Matt, it's a 5-minute student match. How much is there to say about it, and what do you want to say about it?
I actually do think there's a decent amount to say about this match compared to the usual student matches. You know, the Masked Superstar was pretty much gone quickly. There was some funny stuff where Dave called him one of the top prospects in wrestling today while he was preening around like an idiot, and Dave was kind of laughing like, I don't think that's true, Dave. I think he does some swan kicks, and the crowd really boos Davey Andrews when he takes him down, and they pin him pretty quickly. Actually, they do this double team like dropkick German suplex, and Hagedorn steals Andrews' pins and gloats to the crowd. So maybe this is Hagedorn officially becoming a heel. I don't know. But when it goes into a Hagedorn versus Andrews one-on-one match, my first reaction is like, holy shit, this is an elimination 3-way? Because like that's rare on its own, you know.
Why did Gabe do this? Because he doesn't like elimination matches. And why did the Masked Superstar, HC Loke, he's in for 1 minute, like in a 5-minute match. Like why why I don't know why it was an elimination match and why this couldn't have just been 5 minutes of Davey Andrews and Shane Hagedorn. Was one, Gabe that scared of having them alone in the ring for 5 minutes, and two, why was it an elimination match? Was it just so Shane Hagedorn could get a pin along with Davey Andrews? I don't understand it.
I don't know, but it might have actually helped them, get the crowd into it. I don't know. So what I liked about this match is they actually did something different with it. Andrews worked Shane Hagedorn's ear, and that's not something you see very often. What other match can you think of? The one I could think of off the top of my head is Roddy Piper against Greg Valentine from Starrcade in '83, right? How many other matches can you think of where somebody works the ear? And I'm not saying it was an amazing match or anything, but hey, you know what? Way to go, trying to do something different here. And you could tell that the ear was being worked because Hagedorn multiple times grabbed his ear and said, my ear, a few different times. We love you, Shane. No, but I actually enjoyed it. And at one point, Andrews actually pulled Shane's ear like a mildly abusive parent and just dragged him around by it. Hagedorn got some offense, hit a belly-to-back suplex on it, but Andrews, once he lands, immediately grabs a headlock targeting the ear, even holds on to the headlock after Shane fights hard to reverse it. Hagedorn misses some move off the top rope. Andrews gets a cross-face style headlock on Shane, over the ear. Shane taps out. It was a rookie match, but they tried to tell a story. It was slightly different. I don't know. I actually think this is probably better than a lot of these short little showcase matches for the rookies.
I thought this match was perfectly fine. Yeah, I felt bad for Andrews and Hagedorn because I feel like the masked New York superstar, he was being really goofy with his mannerisms and doing like you said the Karate Kid crane kick, and it was the crowd was really starting to get into the goofiness of him, and then they have him eliminated, and I feel like at that point the fans kind of turned on Davey Andrews and maybe they wouldn't have been allowed for the match at all ever because it was a student match, but I felt like the match, it definitely took a hit with the crowd once the Masked Superstar was gone, and maybe it would have been better just to not get them laughing at the wackiness to begin with and then take it away with them after 1 minute. But I thought the student match was, it was perfectly acceptable. I think most of these Ring of Honor student matches so far, you can tell they're students and they're not getting much of a chance to wrestle in terms of match lengths. But this match and most of the student matches, there aren't really botches. They do. Their mechanics are perfectly solid. There's a couple moves like drop kicks and stuff where maybe they don't hit quite as cleanly or sharply as a pro would, but for student matches, for guys that have barely any ring experience, it's kind of impressive that they're not really botching anything. They're doing things that they're not doing the absolute. They're doing some fairly major moves like the German and stuff. They're not doing complete simplistic moves, and they're not screwing anything up. And yeah, the working over the ear was interesting too, because like you said, you hardly ever see that in wrestling, and Hagedorn really screaming to sell. I thought it was interesting too that I feel like in a lot of wrestling, when guys, especially when they're young, they only get 4 or 5 minutes. They go out there and they just try and cram every move they can and try and steal the show. And these guys, it was interesting. They worked more methodical at points and tried to actually tell a story in the 4 minutes they had with each other, which probably wasn't to their benefit in terms of capturing the crowd. But, in a way, it was kind of admirable that they actually were we're going to try and actually tell a little bit of a story, even if it's a very minor story, and we're not going to just try and do 18 moves a minute and probably botch them, because we're going to try and do a more measured pace to this. And at one point on commentary, Gabe says, these guys have only had 20 or 25 matches. Can you imagine how good they'll be in a couple years when they've had a couple hundred matches under their belts? And I don't know where Gabe was expecting these guys to get those matches, because in Ring of Honor, they were getting almost none. So, yeah. And I mean, Davey Andrews, I don't think he's even wrestling in a couple years. So,
yeah, he's not.
Yeah, so... that was a little weird.
And now we have officially talked about this match probably significantly longer than it lasted.
Exactly. So up next is a match, Matt, I was hoping would be historical. It's not quite historical. It's almost historical. Chad Collyer and Nigel McGuinness defeated the Second City Saints of CM Punk and Colt Cabana in 17 minutes, 37 seconds when Nigel pinned Colt while holding onto the ropes. He basically sat down during a pinning predicament and held onto the ropes. I thought to myself, looking at the results, I thought, is this the last time CM Punk and Colt Cabana ever teamed together? Because then we could say, oh, we just covered a little piece of history. And the answer is, Matt, is almost. Because looking at Cage Match, Colt Cabana and CM Punk did team together 2 more times, once in a dark match in OVW in 2007 in an 8-man tag. They were on the same team. And then they had one final tag match together on February 27, 2008, also an OVW dark match. CM Punk and Colt Cabana defeated Domino of Deuce and Domino fame and Seth Skyfire in Davis Arena in Louisville, Kentucky. So this is the first match, I think, the last match of theirs that ever made tape, but technically it's their second last tag team match as a 2-man tag team ever. But did they go out with a bang, Matt, or did they go out with a meh?
A whimper is the word you're looking for, yes?
Yeah. I didn't want to go that strong, but yeah, this maybe.
No, I didn't like this match. I mean, maybe it was the crowd not reacting to almost anything. Maybe it was just the match didn't totally know what it wanted to be. There were, a few amusing things, but overall I thought it felt super long. I looked up the time and I realized this was under 20 minutes and I could not believe it. Like, to me, this match felt like it was a half hour long. I don't know if you had a similar opinion. It was very slow. There was no heat. There was even an audible boring chant from a couple people, which you really rarely hear in ROH during this era. There's a lot of stuff where, they're doing wrestling moves with Punk against Nigel and Chad, and Cabana will try to come in and just start brawling with Nigel, and the crowd never reacts at all to it. There is I think maybe one guy in the crowd at one point who chants, "Let them fight," but it's literally one guy, and the crowd is just not. I don't know, but and I wasn't really loving it either. There was some stuff I enjoyed, when Collyer whipped Cabana into the ropes and Nigel got his knee up to knee Cabana as he hit the ropes, and Cabana just yells, "I see that, Nigel," and then knocks him off the apron. There's also a spot where McGuinness is doing the artful Dodger thing on Punk, and Colt from the apron is advising Punk about what's going to happen next and telling him not to fall for it, but Punk falls for it anyway. I like that.
That was so good. There's a point where he's yelling instructions during the sequence, and I wrote this down. He goes, "He's going to go through your legs. He's holding up his hands. Don't connect them." I just wrote, "Don't connect them." Don't hold his hands, and Punk does. And I love how scared Colt is.
Definitely the highlight of the match.
Absolutely.
I would say, yeah, by far. If you want to just watch one spot of that match, that's the spot. If you do the thing where you watch matches and watch one spot, that's the one for this match. There is another good spot where Collyer and Punk look at the brawling Nigel, because they've been breaking them up for most of the match, and then at one point they just stand there, they look at them, and they just go, heck, let them fight. And Punk walks away, and Collyer takes that opportunity to attack him from behind, almost like Punk is kind of dumb in this match, which is another thing that he doesn't usually let himself be portrayed as. So I guess he's not Triple H after all. There's also a few Steiners things going on. Cabana hits a standing Rana, almost like a Frankensteiner. Punk hits a tilt-a-whirl. It's they're trying to be the Steiners. But this is another situation where when Cabana gets the hot tag to Punk and Punk's a house of fire, the crowd is not reacting like it's a hot tag. And then Nigel and Collyer slow things down again. There's Nigel keeps trying to run away from Colt. At one point, Cabana saves Punk from a suplex. Punk hits a neck breaker while Cabana hits a top rope splash on Nigel at the same time for 2. And then Cabana yells, Pepsi Plunge, which guarantees that Punk will not hit the Pepsi Plunge, because that is just a rule. And, of course, he doesn't. Collier knocks him off the top rope. Cabana goes for a sunset flip. Nigel drops down, grabs the ropes, and gets the win. Gabe is again shocked that Nigel grabbed the ropes. Like, wow, this Nigel, he really is a cheater, huh? But I don't know. It just didn't work. Like, other than those couple entertaining spots we mentioned, keep in mind there was like another 18 minutes of stuff that was just I don't know, just dull. I mean, they tried. Doesn't always work. I don't know. Just was boring to me more than anything.
I liked the match more than you. I thought it was somewhat enjoyable, but I do agree that it was disappointing from these 4, and there were parts that were very boring. I do think that Colt's character work I really liked. I always love when wrestlers, especially in tag matches, where they always are being their character even when they're on the apron. And here, Colt, whether he's coaching Punk for the Artful Dodger, or he's trash talking Nigel, or just chomping at the bit to get at him, or that spot like you mentioned where at one point Nigel or someone gets whipped into the ropes and Colt catches him on the ropes with a knee on the apron, and then when Nigel tries to do it, Colt has it scouted. All that stuff is really cool, little character work. Even the fact that they keep getting to these pull-apart brawls, I thought that's a cool way to kind of just further their feud. But I thought the brawls generally didn't look very good. They just looked like 2 kids rolling around, throwing bad punches at each other. And yeah, there were boring moments in this match that didn't connect. When you see these 4 guys, it just felt like they never got into a good flow with this match. And I don't know why, but it just felt like that. There were some moments I thought, in addition to yours, that I thought were kind of okay, interesting, or at least notable. I like Collier before the match saying, "Shake my hand, hippie," to CM Punk, and Punk being like trying to stifle a laugh and being like, "What the
Gabe was appalled that he called Punk a hippie.
There was a moment where this is not cool, but Nigel tells Colt that he wrestles like a woman, which I thought today that would just be oh, you mean I'm going to main event WrestleMania and have the best match on the weekend? Oh, that's nice of you to say, but I guess back then that was supposed to be just a huge put down.
You throw like a girl.
Yeah. Colt at one point ducked Nigel's rebound lariat and and hit Collier, which allowed him to make the hot tag, which I like that he actually ducked it, an early counter to it. Nigel does a rebound lariat, but with a forearm instead of a lariat to Punk, which he was doing all sorts of little variations at first with the rebound. And then I really liked Chad Collier late in the match has a Texas Cloverleaf on Colt Cabana, and Punk does the Shining Wizard from the Texas Cloverleaf to Collier. And I thought that was really cool because, the Shining Wizard is a really cool spot, but one of my main gripes with it is it was so overused in this era, and so often if wrestlers had to get into this weird unnatural position to feed for the Shining Wizard where they would get on one knee and then spend an extra 5 seconds there until the other guy hit the Shining Wizard, which you would normally never see in a match, a guy stay in that position for that long. But with the Texas Cloverleaf, it was such a natural way. I didn't see it coming. Even when Punk was running at Collier, I was like, oh, he's going to just hit him with a forearm or something. And then when I saw the Shining Wizard, it was one of the rare Shining Wizards where I was I did not see that coming. So I thought that was cool.
The other fun thing about the Shining Wizard is it has a really funny name.
Yeah, exactly. Not as good as when what's his name? Eric Cannon. He came out during this era, a Shining Wizard, but it ends with an enziguri, and he called it the Glimmering Warlock.
Yes,
which is just perfectly ridiculous.
Yes, perfect.
So, going last thing I want to say is going to what you said. When Gabe at the end says, "I can't believe Nigel grabbed the ropes," it was just one of those things where literally the previous show had a Nigel versus Colt match where Nigel clearly purposely kicks Colt Cabana in the nuts and then immediately pins him for the win. At that point, you have to stop being surprised that a guy will cheat to win. When a guy punts a guy in the balls to win the match, you can't be like, oh my God, I'm getting the vapors here. Nigel grabbed the ropes. Like, no, he's a heel now. He clearly turned a heel on the last show. But, and one other note, Matt, I thought this was interesting. We did all the news at the start about Punk, getting close to signing with WWE. This was the first time on a Ring of Honor release where it's acknowledged that Punk's probably going. Because at one point on commentary, out of nowhere, Punk just brings up, he says, Punk has been the subject of a lot of rumors as he's the hottest commodity in wrestling right now. And he says TNA, WWE, and All Japan all have interest in him. And then Gabe continues, he says, Punk says his independent career will not be complete without the Ring of Honor title. So clearly, by the time that Gabe was doing commentary for this DVD, he knew Punk was going. I thought it was interesting because nowhere in the newsletters I'm reading does it bring up that All Japan has interest in him. But Gabe throws that in there. So I thought that was interesting. That brings us to the semi-main event, the Ring of Honor Pure Title match. Samoa Joe defeated James Gibson via submission in 23 minutes, 54 seconds when Gibson tapped to the rear naked choke. I thought this was a good match, but it was a little disappointing to me. I would say this is like a 3.5 star match. I thought these guys had the potential to just blow me away. Now, I'll start off by saying, I feel kind of bad criticizing this match because this was Joe's first match, at least in Ring of Honor, coming back from what I understand was like a legit rib injury. So I always feel kind of shitty when I criticize a match for being, like, in this case, slightly disappointing when a guy might have been working hurt. But I felt like this match, there was cool stuff in it. The execution was good, as you'd expect from these two. But it just didn't feel as epic as I would want it to be, especially for the length. And I felt like this match, Joe is a guy who a lot of times he lets moves breathe. Like, he'll hit a big move and he'll like kind of let it sit there for a little while before he does another one. And some people don't like that. I like that most of the time. I think like letting moves breathe like calls more attention to them and makes them feel more epic and it has more of an impact. And I like that style. I felt like this was a rare Joe match for me where there was a lot of moments in this match where I felt like Joe, I don't know if he was blown up or still just struggling with a sore ribs or something. But there were a lot of moments in this match where like Joe would hit something and he would just kind of kneel down or wait around for a while, to the point where Gabe even called attention to it on commentary. Like, he felt like he had to explain it. Gabe at one point said something like, I forget, he said something like, I forget, he was just talking about the ribs or something. He was saying like, oh, Joe's coming back from the rib injury still, and that's why he's taking so long. But even he felt like he had to call attention to it. In terms of a story, this match had the most basic, average story that so many pure title matches have, which is both guys use up some rope breaks. Eventually, one guy, in this case James Gibson, uses up all his rope breaks. After he does that, the other guy gets him in a submission. The guy gets to the ropes. It doesn't matter. He ends up having to tap out. I felt like the one problem with that is, one, it's kind of a standard story, but it's not the worst story. But also, the camera they chose to focus on such an extreme close-up. You did not see that he got the ropes, and the commentators don't even really mention that he got to the ropes. And then finally, when he taps out, they cut to the hard cam, and you see, oh, he got to the ropes. You can kind of assume from the crawling, but you don't really see till the end that he actually grabbed the ropes and then tapped out because he was like, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to get out of this. There were, cool moments in the match. I think the big highlight of this match, obviously, is the belly to back superplex that Gibson does to Joe, which is just, you rarely see Joe come off the top and take a move like a belly to back superplex. Like, I thought that was really cool. And I thought the other cool thing was this was like a legit split crowd. Like, you could tell different voices during the dueling chants, and there was people that definitely wanted Gibson to beat Joe and people that definitely wanted Joe to win. There was like a fuck 'em up, Gibson fuck 'em up chant after that superplex. There's even someone that's heckling Joe in the crowd, because at one point Joe is like, hears someone in the crowd, and like in the middle of wrestling, he like turns and screams at someone in the crowd, like, get the fuck out. And like, so whatever this fan was saying, I couldn't make out what they were saying. It pissed Joe off.
Don't piss off Samoa Joe.
Exactly. Overall, I thought this was I was probably, to give away what I feel about the main event, this is probably my third favorite match on the show. And again, like 3.5 stars. But with James Gibson and Samoa Joe, I think those are two of the best guys in the entire promotion. I felt like they could have had like a match of the year contender. And to me, this wasn't that.
Yeah, for some reason, I had a hunch you wouldn't be gaga for this match, but I really liked it a lot. I loved it, actually. Like, I thought it was easily 4 stars, maybe even higher. And at the end, Gabe calls it the best pure title match. And, that's a lot of times that stuff is hype. I think that's true. Like, to me, this was the best pure title match.
I actually might like Jay Lethal Joe better, but it would be up there.
Yeah, I mean, based on your rating, that would make sense. For me, this was the better one. And it was, and I think better than some of the world title matches on recent shows. I mean, one thing that I liked was just that they really did feel like they were working a main event match. And, given that this crowd was pretty quiet for a lot of the show, the fact that they were able to keep their interest for a 20-something minute match, because this was the longest match on the show, I thought was very helpful. There were slow parts, definitely, in the middle of the match, as he's working Gibson's back and Gibson's trying to fight out. But, I didn't mind it. Like, the one thing that I could maybe say as a criticism was, there's a lot of different, like, targets to some of the holds and stuff. And there wasn't this one solid storyline about, like, I'm gonna work this, this body part, and then I'm gonna win based on that. But that's okay. They were working the pure title rules, like you were talking about. But what I just really enjoyed was how it built to this struggle near the end. With Gibson just looks so determined. His facial expressions are so good and dramatic, and he really seemed like he was just going for it here. And he was charging at Joe, and Joe would cut him off, and he seemed dejected, and he'd fight out of holds and fight back into holds. I really liked his belly-to-back suplex off the top. It wasn't quite as beautiful as Danielson's, but it was like faster. It had more pop. Danielson has that thing where he like really holds him and drops him gracefully, and this was just more like boom, boom, down.
Yeah.
And he gets a 2 count with that. I also like that the camera really did a good job of showing Gibson's determined face a bunch of times. There was like a spot where he went for the swinging DDT, but instead of actually driving him down, he just turned it into the front choke, and Joe got out of the choke a couple of times. He went for Gibson did hit like you said, the trailer hitch, the striker lock for the first time in ROH. Like, that was a big move. Made sense that he was busting out new holds, given that, it was a pure title match. So that's what you do. And got Joe to use a rope break from that. I like that they were selling how tired they are. Gibson, he went for the plancha on Joe, and Joe caught him and just threw him into the guardrail. I actually thought Joe was going to go for the ole ole kick, but he never does.
Yeah.
And, but so they're just exhausted and they get back in the ring. When Joe goes for the muscle buster and Gibson turns that into the choke, the crowd just goes insane. They love that. And Joe powers out. Gibson goes for the roll up, and that's when Joe turns the O'Connor roll into the choke and gets the win. But I don't know. I just really liked the drama of the last few minutes. I thought the opening just felt epic. The slow part in the middle wasn't too slow for me. So yeah, you're right that I don't think this was a match of the year. But I do think this was a hell of a really darn good match. A whole rootin' tootin' zippity doo dah dangle diddly ding dong dinger of a match.
One other thing I noticed about the match, did you notice that Gibson threw a lot of headbutts to Joe, and a lot of times when someone tries to headbutt Joe, Joe does like the no-sell, like the hard-headed Samoan, you can't headbutt a Samoan thing. And here, he didn't really sell the headbutts, but he didn't no-sell them. And part of me wonders, is that like out of respect to James Gibson? Like, okay, you can headbutt me, and I'm not going to no-sell it, because you're James Gibson, because he was throwing a lot of headbutts to Samoa Joe at certain points.
Yeah, I mean, and hey, why not? And Gibson is worthy of that respect. The one thing I will say, Gibson came out, because we criticize his Confederate flag trunks. He really went for it here. He was draped in a Confederate flag on the way out and got big cheers for it, despite being in Buffalo, near the Canadian border, with a Confederate flag. Wrestling's fucked up.
Oh, God. Maybe they just really like John Deere. I don't know. So I don't even remember if he was wearing his John Deere trunks on the show.
He was, but man, that was a big ass Confederate flag. He was just draped in it.
And it tells you, I mean, those fans love James Gibson. Even in a new market like Buffalo, like he gets another one of those big post-match stays in the ring, gets applause after a losing effort, standing ovation kind of things. Like very loved in pretty much every market in Ring of Honor. And that brings us to the main event, the Ring of Honor World Title match. Austin Aries successfully defends the title. He defeats Spanky in 18 minutes of 31 seconds with the 450 via pinfall after he hits the 450 splash. So first thing I should mention before I hand it to you, Matt, is I didn't know this till after I did my research, but Spanky was actually coming into this match injured. The Observer wrote, Spanky suffered a groin injury on his recent Japan tour and missed his indie shows this past weekend, but will return on the debut show in Buffalo for Ring of Honor against Austin Aries. So apparently, Spanky had been recently injured enough to miss some wrestling shows, but he worked here, and credit to him, like I didn't really notice anything that would give me the impression that he was hurt watching this match. But what did you think about the match?
It sounds like I didn't like it as much as you, but I did like it a lot. I thought it would the second best match on the show. By a pretty solid margin. I didn't like it as much as the Joe match. I did like it more than the Shelley match. I thought the neck focus, right? Both guys working on each other's neck, right? So Aries obviously teased the injured neck early, and in that promo, and then he attacked Spanky's neck, and so it was like neck versus neck, and I thought that gave the match a lot of focus. A couple funny things. So remember I mentioned that when Punk did his tribute to Chris Candido, he did the triple threat sign. And that looked a lot like the white power sign. So Spanky, when he gets in the ring, he just looks right at the hard camera and just like does the OK sign, which I don't remember being a thing that he did. But obviously there's nothing to it. Like that's not what that meant in 2005. It just meant OK. But man, it just seems weird watching him do it so like blatantly now. I'm not accusing Spanky of anything. Again, that symbol meant nothing like that in 2005, but still pretty weird. Also, something completely unrelated to this, but just something I was thinking about. WWE, when they hire guys, sometimes they'll change wrestlers' names and it won't be for the better. I do think they were right about Spanky turning and making him Brian Kendrick. When you think about it, Spanky's not a great name for a main event wrestler.
No.
But,
especially if you like look into, sorry to interrupt, I just want to say, if you look into why apparently that was a nickname given to him on like a wrestling tour because he masturbated so much. Like if anyone like looks into like if he was WWE superstar Spanky and then anyone did like the research, like do you really want a wrestler whose identity is jerks off a lot? I mean,
and plus, is every podcast now going to be hosted by Spanky and Spanky? But anywho, but yeah, as far as the match, another thing, Aries is like wearing that facial hair that he's kind of becomes known for. I think that's like the first time I've really noticed him with prominent facial hair in ROH. So that with the mustache almost coming in. So that's much closer to the Aries that we're used to today. But he has that. He has that rumored neck injury, so Spanky's going after it with that sliced bread number 2. He tries to go for it early. Aries blocks it. So Spanky hits a belly-to-back suplex, like right on his head, and then does a bunch of strikes to the neck. There are some awkward spots here. Like there's one point where Spanky reverses a whip and whips Aries front first into the ropes and hits him in the back of the neck. And Gabe actually responds to this by saying Aries seems off his game. So I think he noticed what I did too. Like, I don't think that spot went exactly the way it was supposed to. And there are a couple other spots like that too, where there's just like a little miniature miscommunication. So things don't hit quite as flushly as in matches with these guys usually, as spots with these guys usually do. But, they're fighting on the floor, and Aries does a neck breaker on Spanky by dropping him down over the guardrail, which seems really, really painful. Like I would be afraid to take that spot if I were a wrestler, but I'd also be afraid to take all the spots. So it's probably part of why I'm not a wrestler. And then Aries follows that up by pile driving Spanky through a wooden chair at ringside. So they really are going for it with pretty big spots, pretty early in the match. And then Aries follows that up by yelling, "I got a splinter in my ass," which is a great thing to hear during a wrestling match. So I'd say the early part of this match, thumbs up. Aries, does a neck breaker with Spanky's feet draped over the ropes. But after each move he does, he's holding his own neck. So it's a neck off. The only thing I'd want more is if these two guys started necking. You know what I mean? No, I'm just kidding. Another thing that Aries does, one of his famous ROH spots is doing that slow motion reversal, want to see it again thing. He doesn't quite do that here, but he sort of does the genesis of the spot. He doesn't do the slow motion, but he does do the reverse, where he's like, want to see it again? And then goes for, I think it was an elbow drop, right? Or a knee drop. It was a knee drop.
Knee drop.
Yeah. And he's like, want to see it again? So I think that's the first time I can ever remember him doing that in ROH. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I felt like this was the first time. This is the first time I think I've seen Aries really interact with the crowd a bit more. He would talk "Hey, your champ is here." He shouted to the crowd something like that once, and then they'll want to see it again. He's definitely getting a little looser and more comfortable, I think, on this show. And I think that's the first probably going for the second knee drop, although it doesn't work this time. Hello?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Oops.
No problem.
Spanky at one point hits a big elbow on the back of Aries' neck, and he goes for the cover, and Aries goes for a quick roll-up for 2, and Gabe goes, "That's how Loke defeated Cheech earlier tonight." And I just did not expect that match to be referenced during the main event. It was a big surprise. I wonder if either of those guys know to this day that their match was referenced during the main event. But it was, just letting you know. There's a good spot where Aries reversed another sliced bread attempt into a tombstone. I like the creative ways that, people can avoid that move. The sliced bread, the contra code, the whatever version of that you do. Spanky avoids a 450. Aries lands on his feet, and Spanky hits a super kick, followed by a kick to the back, followed by a bridging German suplex for 2. They trade strikes in the middle of the ring. Aries winds up and then just pokes him in the eye, which, always like that one. Spanky goes for a sliced bread again, but Aries drops him on the top rope. And then Spanky fights back and hits a sliced bread number 2 from the top rope. But Aries almost falls out of the ring. Spanky drags him back in, but Aries gets his hand on the ropes for a really great near fall. And during this spot, somehow Aries busts his chin open, a la Survival of the Fittest. And Aries comes back with a hard kicks, a brainbuster, 450 from a really wild angle. It was just far away and slanted, and he still hits it really well and gets the win. The one thing I would criticize about the finish is, for Spanky hitting the top rope slice bread number 2, Aries, he kind of gets over it very quickly, right? Yeah. But I guess Gabe explains it by saying seeing his own blood woke him up and gave him adrenaline, which, all right, in the world of wrestling, I guess that's not the craziest logic. But still, I would have liked to see him maybe sell it for a minute after that near fall, as opposed to just immediately coming back when hitting all of his big moves out of the blue. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that Spanky got to have a main event world title match like this sometime in his ROH run, because his run during this time was about as long as Gibson's, and it's much less remembered. But he had some good matches during it, and I think this was one of them.
Yeah, I like this match more than you, but I don't think I like this match as much as you probably would think I liked it. So I think we probably have the same top 3 matches for this show. I think the difference is you would have Gibson, Joe as 1, and Strong and Shelley as 3, and I would have Gibson, Gibson, Joe is 3, and Strong, Shelley is 1. But I think we'd both have this as number 2. I would give this 3 3/4 stars. I think this is about as good as a match can be without being great. And I started thinking when I was writing my notes for this match that That's how I've probably given a lot of Aries matches around this era that kind of like review in my notes, even though I do think he's had great matches. I mean, obviously with the first one with Joe, with Danielson, the cage match with Cabana, even would say is a great match, I think. But I feel like a lot of Aries matches on this period are like 3 3/4 star matches where something is just feeling missing. And I've probably said this about Aries before, but I would always say like, if you were doing the wrestling like simulating game or the old Transformer cards where they would like divide a person into different attributes and give them a rank of 0 to 10 on all of them, this era, like early to mid 2005 Austin Aries, I feel like would be an 8 or 9 out of 10 on every attribute except intangibles. They'd be like a 2 or a 3, where I feel like Aries, he has the athletic ability. He has a good look other than the height. He has charisma. The mic work, he's working on it. He's getting better. He's very versatile in the ring. He can sell. He can do a bit of comedy. He can hit hard. He can work the mat well. He can fly. He can do your standard just indie work rate moves. Like, the only thing he's missing, there's a lot of matches like this where I feel like this match has a story. It's got cool moves. They work hard. And it's just there's something undefinable that a lot of his matches where his effort is always there. There's just something missing that would push it over the top. And whatever he's missing at this point, Samoa Joe has it, CM Punk has it, Bryan Danielson has it. And I think Austin Aries later in his career would even get some of that missing little intangible, whatever you want to call it. But at this point, I think he just had the hard work and the raw talent. But still, I thought this was a very good match. I really liked the story that, you would expect they had built up, that Spanky was going to work over Aries' neck. I love that Aries then turned it around. It's like, fuck it, I'll work over your neck too if you're working over my neck. I like I mentioned earlier, I thought you were starting to see Aries interact with the crowd a little bit more, get a little more confident there. There was a great belly to back suplex from Spanky where Aries landed, looked like almost on his neck, just looked brutal. You mentioned the neck breaker on the barricade. There was also a fantastic Okada level running drop kick to Spanky's head in the corner. And the thing I always love, I mentioned this before with Aries, is when he focuses on a body part, his offense, he'll like precision aim it exactly at that body part. Like if he's working over your arm, he'll hit moves like exactly on the arm. And like where a lot of wrestlers, they'll have a hard time really making good specific contact with a specific body part. Aries is really good with that stuff. And also, this was a match I felt like near the end had excellent near falls. I felt Spanky in particular had a couple near falls where he's being pinned, where his kickouts are so good at being right at the last second. Big flaw in the match, I think you went over it already, Matt, which is, Spanky hits a slice bread off either the top or the second turnbuckle, and Aries did a great job of rolling to try and get through the ropes, and Spanky just grabbing his leg and pulling him back in. And it was a great near fall with Aries grabbing the ropes. But I completely agree. With a spot that big, Aries was up within seconds going right to the finish, hitting all his biggest moves. And like you said, how Gabe was like, oh, well, maybe Gabe was saying, oh, that blood of Aries splitting his chin open as give him a burst of adrenaline. I feel like that's another moment you mentioned earlier where Gabe was trying to explain a spot. I feel like Gabe probably agreed with us that Aries was up too soon, because Gabe was, that line was Gabe basically trying to explain why is Aries back on offense so quickly after taking what should be like a super big variation of a finishing move. And that was, to me, kind of an abrupt turn in the momentum of the match. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not giving it like a 4-star higher rating. But I still thought very good match, very enjoyable. And a good way to end the night. So after the match, they shake hands. So that's continuing the kind of weird Aries thing where he's a heel, but he's still also kind of doing weird face things. Like, he's the kind of guy that will beat someone down with a pipe and injure them legitimately and gouge a guy's eyes during the match, but then he will ask for a handshake afterwards and he won't ask for interference from his buddy during the match. So kind of a weird Aries character at this point. I also felt this was another one of those matches where the crowd was pretty quiet during a lot of it, even though I was enjoying. And this crowd, I don't know, they were kind of up and down in terms of volume, but
they definitely got into a lot of the near falls, though.
Yeah, at the end, yeah. So we cut to BJ Whitmer and Jimmy Jacobs backstage. BJ says when they won the tag titles, people thought it was a fluke, but then he runs down all the teams they've beaten since then. He says they're going to hold the belts for a long time. He slaps Jimmy on the chest, and Jimmy sells that it hurt him. Jimmy starts to huss, but then he says they don't even need that because they'll do anything to keep the belts. Again, I think that this promo kind of speaks to the confusion again where Jimmy husses, but then he says he doesn't need to huss. And I feel like this is the second or third time they've kind of done the Jimmy's moving away from a huss thing, and then he goes back to hussing a couple shows later. But we'll see where this goes from here. But always kind of weird.
He eventually does stop hussing, but I don't know. I don't remember when.
Yes, eventually it will happen.
Yeah.
Cut to Austin Aries and Roderick Strong by the hockey boards in the building after the show. Aries says he knows what we're all thinking. Here's the world champion. He's all busted up and bleeding. Aries says this isn't the first time, though, and he notes that Bryan Danielson busted up his chin to the tune of 25 stitches last year. Aries asks, where's Bryan Danielson now? I sent him packing. Aries then calls out Low-Ki and CM Punk, saying they're going to have to do a lot more than this to take his title. At this point, Aries asks a doctor who's right near him what he thinks. Doc takes a look, and he says he thinks Aries will be okay. Roderick Strong says he wants to make sure Aries will still be pretty, which I thought was funny. Aries says he doesn't care if the doc has to glue, staple, or stitch it closed. Just stop the bleeding on his cut. So, little promo there trying to work in the legit injury into the promo. And I imagine that was a real doctor, I would guess. I would love it would turn out just to be someone's dad or somebody, but just looked like a old ringside doctor, I guess.
There's at least a decent chance that he was someone's dad.
Yeah, you're right. Both can be true.
Yeah.
And then that brings us to...
in this riddle, the doctor is the mom.
Mr. Mom. And that brings us to the final segment. Next, we join Spanky and James Gibson backstage. Gabe asks from behind the camera if they're ready for their promo, but Spanky says he needs to talk to Jamie first, so of course this is definitely not on camera. Spanky tells Gibson that they've worked too long, too hard to come back home empty-handed. He says he has no one to blame but himself, and he wants to know where they're going to go from here. He's kind of distraught. Gibson says nice guys finish last, and while the fans have been great and he's loved their reaction here in Ring of Honor, it's made him soft. Gibson says he knows a guy that kicked ass and took names, and that's Jamie by God Noble, the Redneck Messiah. He says he knows they can't call him that no more, but they can call him Gibson, Noble, or Gomer fucking Pyle for all he cares. Next show, Jamie Noble is showing up in New York. No more Mr. Nice Guy. He's going to do whatever it takes to win. He tells Spanky that they have to watch each other's backs. They've been to the dance. They should have headlined WrestleMania, but they dropped the ball. He says they've got to get some gold, and these people have manipulated them, he says, I guess referring to the fans. Spanky likes what he's hearing, and so I guess they never end up cutting their promo. Gabe said, hey, Spanky tells Gabe, hey, can we speak in private first? And that's how the show ends. So they never really cut what's supposed to be a promo, but I guess that's their new direction. No more Mr. Nice Guys. They're going to continue to win the title.
And spoiler alert, starting at the next show, James Gibson's new name is Gomer fucking Pyle. But seriously, I don't know if this actually happens. I'm going to pay attention to this, but I don't think James Gibson's ROH persona changes much at all after this. Spanky,
he doesn't turn heel, I don't think.
No, it definitely doesn't turn heel, and Spanky does, a couple months later. But I don't recall Gibson changing anything about his presentation, so I'm interested to see if I'm misremembering, because
me too.
It seems like this promo just didn't lead to much of anything. I guess unless you're saying it's planted the seeds for Spanky's heel turn 2 months from then, I guess that's possible. I don't know.
I guess you could say Spanky took Gibson's words to heart more than Gibson even did about no more Mr. Nice Guy, maybe, but I feel like that's probably a stretch of me trying to create a connection that wasn't intended.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll find out.
But that brings us to the end of the show. Matt, there's been oftentimes shows you're really good at arguing stuff where I'll go into a show and you'll by the end of doing the podcast, when we come up to this point in the show, I'll like the show or like a certain match a bit more than I thought going in, just based on your arguments. I feel like this show, I liked the show a bit more than I think you did. And now by the end of the show, having our conversation for the podcast, I feel like my feeling of the show, now that we've really thought about it, is a little less than I than I thought going in. Like, I feel like I like the show a little less now. I still think it's a decent show. I think there's one great. We both think there's one great match. We disagree on what it is, and I think we both think there are two pretty darn good matches that we agree what they are. Everything else in the show, there's nothing terrible, but there are a bunch of things that are either weird, like, there's the student match, there's the Loka Cheech match, there's, the opening tag, which is fine, but isn't anything special. There's the tag with the Second City Saints that just doesn't click. Nothing is painful to watch, but there's a lot of stuff on the show that is either weird or just doesn't quite work, or you kind of don't know why it's there, other than your theory of just to show us that this is a B show. But there are 3 very good to great matches on the show, I would say.
Yeah, I guess I could say something similar, that I maybe feel a little bit less enthusiastic about the show than I did before we started talking about it. But yeah, I mean, I do think that I like the last 2 matches both a lot. When a show ends with a really good 1-2 punch of 2 very long matches that take up a third of the show, it's hard for me to say, to give the show a thumbs down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, even though this isn't the best ROH show by a long shot, I mean, it followed possibly the best month of shows ever in ROH, May of 2005, right? You could definitely make a case for it, right? So it had a tough act to follow, but if this is their version of a B show in 2005, that's not so bad, It's still a lot of good stuff on it, considering.
I think this show is another one of the shows where you see the depth of Ring of Honor, where you think of Danielson's gone, Low Key's not working this show, and even on, what's technically a B show, there's still so much talent. It's almost like you couldn't have a bad show if you wanted to with this roster, I think. Like, you there's so many good workers, you just put a combination like in a random name generator and you'd get some good matches, I think.
Yeah, so I think overall I would call the show solid. I mean,
it's a solid show.
The undercard is I think weak, and the main events are good enough. And I know you liked one of the undercard matches a lot, but the main events are good enough to bring this, to elevate it to being pretty solid overall. Yeah.
Completely in agreement. And that brings us to the plugs. If you want to contact us through the years, ThROH is how you spell through, at gmail.com. We have a thread on the Pro Wrestling Only Plugs forum. If you want to contact us via Twitter, I am at Trevor Dame, D-A-M as in Mother E, Matt at Mayor MGF, same thing, M. And next time on the show, we will start a new era, Matt, because I believe we were finally in the Matt attended some of these shows live era.
It's true.
Starting with The Future Is Now. The Matt Future Is Now is what it should have been called. And it's another show in New York proper this time. And we get Low Key versus Austin Aries. We get CM Punk versus Roderick Strong. We get Nigel McGuinness versus Samoa Joe for the Pure title. So this is going to be probably a pretty big show. And I know we were talking about, I don't know if we should spoil it or not, you were talking about maybe we were going to do for the next show the first ever Through the Years that also reviews a match that did not occur in Ring of Honor. So we might have a bonus match on that show even.
That's right. And listen, I'm going to spoil this one, whether you want me to or not. Justin Shapiro is going to be on the next show, and I can't imagine how anyone would want to pass that one up.
Yeah, so it's going to be a great show, and it's the last show before the Summer of Punk starts, because we'll be doing shows in the summer about the Summer of Punk. So this should be a lot of fun, and and this was fun. So great show, and until next time, have a good time, have a great time.